I'm not supposed to make music right now, am I? Are you waiting for me to make music? Is this
No, no.
Lightbath making music right now?
Yeah, this
No.
is live. Just hang on. Let me.
Okay.
Why does it want me to update passwords? Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to latest deep dive live stream. Um, let's just see how we're doing in the chat. All right, we got chat going. Okay, this afternoon we have Chris Meyer from Alias Zone and our special guest, Lightbath, also known as Brian Knoll. And we've got a lot of cool stuff for you. We've got some extensive demos and discussion on hybrid systems, as well as a couple new Christmas present type features, some simple things I've added the last few days I'd like to show you. So we're going to start with some music from Brian.
Is that my cue, Jim?
That is your cue.
All right, great. I wanted to see. I'm going to ask even before, because I should have asked this earlier before I started making music. But how do I know when I'm visible? If I see myself visible in Zoom, does that mean everybody on the stream sees me too, or is it just
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
I'll highlight you on the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
all right.
Well,
And
well, I'm not looking at the chat, so if anybody is here that I know, hi, thanks for being here. I'll catch you later, but say hi so that Jim knows. He can call it out and I can say hi. But all right, I'm gonna make a little bit of music. See the clever trick I just did there to get that sequence to. But then there's no auto anymore, so the sequence won't play. Look at all this. Lightbath is on the cutting edge with the vector right now, trying some experimental features and coaxing all the bugs out of the system. But I'll take that as my cane from the side of the stage, pulling me off. So I'll be off in just a second here. Let's wrap this up, Lightbath. Thanks for having me.
That was great.
That's it. Oh, is that you or me? That played it again. I'm recording on so many sides here. I think that was my system glitching because I was trying to record in Bitwig while I did it, and I didn't test that first. I just hit record on the transport and recorded like 1,000 tracks, like, you know. But that was a study in just going for it and creating dangerously, as the Albert Camus book that I just picked up, book of the speech. Is this me? What's going on here? Okay, there we go. Now I know what's going on. Just Friends was on super slow mode, and it was just triggering the cycle. The VCAs were opening at like its slowest thing. But that was an exercise in creating dangerously. So in other words, I didn't have anything planned, and when Jim asked me to come onto this thing, I thought, okay, I better look like I know what I'm doing with the vector sequencer because I've been using it for more than a year now. Like it's been a year and a half or more, I think, and I still never like made a bunch of sequences, like prepared a bunch of music because I just never prepare music. I come from this thing, right? I come from the monome world before this where I would just draw shapes and then I would manipulate it in the case. And so I'm manipulating things with this, but I have so much more power in this thing to organize things, to transform things, to do things. And I thought I better, try to get some things prepared. So if the vector people around, will notice that I have an entire 3 scenes that I could have played, and I only played 2 of them. So that's my intro, Jim. Please take it away.
It was
Well,
interesting to see, how much live parameter changing you were doing, even changing time divisions and
Yeah,
octaves, things like that. Uh, Glitch isn't the right word, but like you're purposely trying to introduce spikes into what was going on.
for sure. In fact, this might be a good time to show this. One of the main things that I was doing these four, I guess these 3 now, um, offsets, bipolar offsets, are controlling different types of transposes that are after the fact transposes, unlike the transposes in here. Which, by the way, I forgot to use the keys to transpose. I saw Jim do that on the prep beforehand, and I'm like, oh, I forgot that's in there. I even like edited the manual and forgot that was part of it. All the things that I forgot because of But so this is a clouds transpose, right? This is transposing the microcell pitch, just octaves and fifths, and this is doing the transposing the clouds that's on like the second voice, the rings voice here inside of the distinct. And then this is fun. This is transposing the actual oscillator pitch that's running plats in this second distinct. So I'm just running just like normal single plats, not this multi-plat stuff. If you saw my hybrid video series recently, so I'm offsetting just the actual oscillator pitch because all of the voices are being fed via MIDI from the 512 from the vector. I just call it the 512. It's like people calling Ableton Live Ableton. But
I'm totally good with that.
yeah, but from the vector, they're getting all their MIDI notes. So I had this CV input for the, coarse tune basically. I think is literally what it is. Yeah, I don't even know if you can see, but it's literally says that on it there. It's what I have like on screen so that I know if I'm transposing 0, 12, 0, 7, 12, 19, 24, etc. So that allows me to do that really cool thing. It's my favorite sound of all of this stuff. If I were to, I mean, there's delay and there's all sorts of madness. So you can get really wild with it. You have a sequence going that's happening, and then you're throwing in these octave and fifths, so it gets all like the SH101 that, oh, I hit the wrong button. Like the SH101 that you can barely see here, that
Oh
it
yeah,
has the octave, the range control, like any classic synth with the range control, you
I
can
mean,
jam out the range control. So
yeah,
that's some of what's
that's
happening.
always a great thing to have on the synth, and also something I notice is how much you've organized your case around performability, about having controls over things you want to be able to change live.
That's a point. It's funny, I have all of this and I don't think this is going to stay in here, but I'll tell you what this was meant for. This mnemonic devices pair here can take CV offsets into it and record it like a CV recorder. And so I have these settings that are going to need to change, but these are my cloud settings. So this is what's that called? Density and size and I just think of them as what they do. I forget their names, but and the texture, shape, and so that's and then mix, right? And then this is 2 times 2 for a second voice. And so I realized, I could hit record and record some movement, and that would be so cool. But then I realized that the stuff that I'm actually moving all the time is the pitch offsets. So I need to get the pitch offsets down here so that I can like make a little gesture, record that, get it going, and move off to something. But truthfully, it's just so much to juggle already. Like I just need more practice. I mean, if anything, I'll say that my process is so slow with this. Like I just spend time with a system for however long it feels right, and then eventually I get tired of not using a section of it, and so I'll then just be like, okay, let's get that out of there. What can I do better in there? What can go, So I just keep making these changes. It's been like 2 years on this journey. When did I reach out to you first, Jim? What was it? It was like springtime. It'll be two
Yeah, it was
years this
about
spring.
yeah, it was about a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and I was excited because I saw these like real cool cats playing with the vector. Like I mean, is our friend from Chicago on the stream? I was on his stream. Uh, are you
Let's
here, Sam? If you are, I hope you are. If you're not, I love you anyway. I saw people like Sam making music with it, Jeremiah Chu, and they were just doing such really cool things with it. I looked it up, looked over the manual, and realized that there was so much power in there. And the key was for me, the real big point was, okay, I can output MIDI, and I don't want tuning knobs in my case. I don't want to bump tune. Like the last like proper show that I played in Seattle like 2 years ago before I injured myself. Um, I I bumped the Rings course tune knob during the performance, and it was like I literally picked up the mic and was like, "Here, let me try to fix this. This is pretty bad, isn't it?" I don't know
Trust
what
me,
to
even
do,
worse
but
is hitting structure when you're
oh,
playing.
but that's what I do all the time. Yeah, I'll tell you a secret to that if you don't know it already. If you're in the string mode, if you move it with acceleration, it will snap to the pitches that you want. So you just go with confidence and move it, and it will tune. If you're in the second mode, the strings mode,
Yeah.
But if you're in the first modal mode, yeah, it's so hard to tune that one. You have to just know where the nodes are. Currently, this is controlling that for the disting version, and it's hard to use. I'm so accustomed to the actual structure knob and those little graphical flourishes or whatever, those little like ornaments, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
That are nodes that help me find where I need to be when I'm turning it. So yeah.
Yeah. One advantage of silver panels is I've got pencil marks all over mine. This story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, gone are the pencil marks in this case. I'm feeling good about that part of it. And the other bit with the change, if you've noticed, I know this is completely disorganized because once Lightbath goes, he just goes. But the just friends was the point for me that I wanted that poly voice. I really like the way it sounds, and I had only been able to get that with the Mono ecosystem, sequencing it with it. But then I realized that you can use Norns, and there's a just play script that somebody made. In fact, let's see. Midouest. That's the person who made it. That's their when you launch it. And so I literally picked up a Norn's Shield from someone in Seattle that builds them for this sole purpose. There's one script loaded on it, and it is just play so that it would do the MIDI talking through Crow to Just Friends so that I could go out of MIDI 1 of the vector or no, sorry, no. It actually talks to Just Friends through USB. That's what this USB-B is for. It goes to Norns. And then, USB-A is for the... you all weren't able to see any of that, but I've got the launch pad selecting different... what are they called, Jim? I always get the
Presets.
names wrong. Yes, thank you. Presets. Sequences, you know what I mean? But yeah, presets. And down on this little drawer here and a little reverb too. But yeah, so there's a lot going on with this. The MIDI to just play on the Norns for just friends, and then the MIDI TRS out going into the expert sleepers breakout to get into the MIDI pins on the back of these two modules. So
Mhm.
the three voices that are in this case are controlled via MIDI, and then I'm actually using the second MIDI jack just for an easy DIN connection for the studio to sync Bitwig, and actually the modular behind me, and I had patched something up, but I didn't use it. All I used was the birds that were on Morphogene just for a little bit there. But I had some here. I'll show you all. This is what I was trying to do, but I couldn't get the sync to work right. But check this out. Oh wait, is it not? All that to say, I had some weird kick and snares that I was going to try beats for the first time, but I was having marbles trigger them, and it would not be in sync. Like it's because marbles has to, I guess, count the beats to get syncing, and so
Mhm.
the way to do it would be to use the vector. I gotta get into that one of these days. Yeah.
Well, if we can get the expander in your case, you'll have lots of trigger outs to play with.
True that. Well, really, MIDI, if with the system already, I could probably just because there's like an FH2 in that system.
Hmm. Hmm.
That would probably otherwise it'd be some long cables from here to
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
But yeah, but we do need to. That's what has to happen here. Make some space here if I end up not using. I think this is probably sufficient right here. What's this, like 8 and 4 probably? Does that look
Hmm.
like? Yeah. So that's plenty room. So maybe that's the next iteration.
There's
So
additional MIDI on the expander too.
Oh right, more DINs.
Yeah,
Yeah, or TRSs.
yeah. But I like also just the fact that you're doing so much live transposing things like that, because to me that's what takes it out of the realm of a sequence to sounding like a musician's making choices, to play different ranges of the keyboard, et cetera, rather than just a repetitive sequence.
And then probability. I've been doing a thing where chance two. Now that there's a second, there wasn't a second chance on the first one, right? There was
No,
just
No,
one.
just one.
Yeah, chance two is now dedicated as just a global probability for me. I just only ever use the main encoder, encoder 8, and that's just my organizational scheme there. Hey Jim, do you want me to get while I'm here? Do you want me to jump into like the what's happening in the vector?
Sure.
So it's not a lot really, but I'll show you. First off, this whole part, hold down part and choose the part you want to switch to shortcut.
Hmm. Hmm.
Game changing for me when I learned that. That's amazing. Um, you'll see some notes possibly in some of these that aren't the actual notes because I had started this approach where I chose my global scale and then in all my parts, actually this one I had stuck to Mixolydian, but most of them they will follow the global scale if you just turn them all the way to the left. And so
Hmm.
what I haven't done with that yet though is to be in the global and then do transposition there. I don't think maybe that might not even be happening yet. I don't think Q is happening for like changing the scales and yeah and stuff like that. But that's going to be fun when that happens. So I've got these parts. Yeah, remember that? I've got these parts, and let's see if I can get this to where we're hearing it. Wait, are we running? Oh yeah, now we're running. And I'm not sure why that's doing that, but we'll be there in a second. Okay, so oh yeah, this is because of the bug that happened. Um, everything got reset. There's some
Hmm.
bug in my setup here that made the length. It's not allowing me to select auto for it. it's unavailable. So I guess I can just do like 16, but I think it's a 16 step. So yeah. Um, so I've got this part that's doing this. There are different gates going on because if I switch just friends to this middle switch here, it'll pay attention to the gates. Um, I usually have it in this mode, which is just triggers whatever on that. A little bit of velocity, just friends also is paying attention to that. This is one of the benefits of this MIDI addressable voice kind of thing. You get this gate, and I don't know what the distortion's all about right now, but you get this gate and velocity built in, baked in sort of thing that I love, especially when it's available on here. And then it makes any of the voices in the computer feel the same. It's a unified interface. That's kind of one of the really big points here, is that before, when I was kind of cobbling together, a couple different things, the Monom Kriya sequencer can only do so much. And if you're translating to MIDI, you don't have all of those parameters available. So, I mean, it does have velocity and gate though. I tend to not use too much of this. However, length can be fun to make an interesting rhythm that I'll sort of do after the fact. So like the rhythm of this part is not made in the way that I'm used to on a 16-step sequencer, and you just skip the rests, right? You skip the beats you don't want to make something on. Instead of doing that on here, I think this is probably a pretty normal way of approaching this. If you have available 16 steps as your, easy maximum to get to, without too many pages, it is easier to just lengthen a step when you want to make that note longer. Now, it's harder to read. It's a different way of braining the music, but it reminds me a little of, I took this college this class in college at the New School that was based on the music of Steve Coleman. If anybody is familiar with this sort of M-bass theory of Steve Coleman, Five Elements. Andy Milne taught it, piano player that played with Steve back in the day in like the 90s and maybe before. And their music was it was polyrhythmic and metric and tonal possibly too. I didn't understand a lot of it, but I got the idea of the music, and it was basically like this, where you have long beats and short beats, and you basically learn to sing the clave, and the clave is that glue of the piece that is a combination of long beats and short beats, and it really is paired with the kick snare pattern that the drummer plays, and everybody learns to sing that thing and then play like whatever the melody is. And I mean, that's hard enough right there. I mean, I couldn't, always get that going. But whatever the case, that kind of non-metered way of approaching time is what I find that this encourages me to do. And so everything ends up being polyrhythmic. And despite there being a bars and beats counter that I'll have going, I don't tend to pay attention to that in much of my music. I just let the different sequence lengths, phase over one another. So, for example, that one's 5. Looks like 8, 12, 5, and 16 for these, and that's just this particular. Let's see what this one. I vaguely remember that this one that I prepared, I was trying to modulate. I think I took it. Yeah, I removed it. I was modulating the time with it. Right? What is the rate? Things can get out of hand really quickly when you do that. It was wild. I had this whole part that was just slowing and speeding up and then it was like and then starting over and doing that. But it's hard to groove that way. So okay,
there's a tip I can tell you that that helps
please.
with that. Go back to your main sequence control page,
for any
Yep,
part, I
yep.
guess. Yeah.
And then on the reset param, set that to 4, 8, 16 beats,
Oh, right.
and then it'll force the sequence to reset when it reaches those boundaries.
Yeah, that's a good move. While we're here,
Yes.
I've not been able to get well, starts
Yeah,
frozen currently.
this is a very frequent request, and
Yeah.
I'll get to it hopefully in the next few weeks.
Okay, yeah.
Is that like originally in numerology, it had this very complicated scheme where um, it would window along and it could go backwards, and on the vector internally there's the start and the end, and length is constrained based on where the end is, and it doesn't wrap around, and what people want is
Yeah.
for it to wrap around,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
need to allow it to do that. There's um, a lot of little details to attend to there. If you're using a pattern-based preset sync setting, I have to make sure that it's going to reset properly if start is, say, on step 4 or 5.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and but I think that's a very likely to happen feature for early in the year.
Very nice. There's a little bit of, well, other than the bugs that I seem to create the way I make these sequences, or reveal, uh, length is something I want to start playing with. Where I remember when um, uh, Brian Crabtree 10 of Monome came
Hmm.
to play at the place I was staying in, upstate New York, when I did the little synths in the Catskills event years ago, when I met Emily Sprague there, and met the Monome folks. He put together this set. I mean, he was improvising, that had a lot of short length, fast parts, fast
Hmm.
lines,
Hmm.
and they felt like arpeggiators, and he was dynamically changing between them, and changing those lengths, and changing what the notes are, because the grid interface is another one that's it's very good at doing that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but so I realize, when I have these long sequences that are full parts, that's great, but yes, having that full windowing control, not only of the start place, but of the length too. Currently, the length is doing some funny things in my sets here, where it's never matching the number that's on there. But
Hmm.
that's a great way that I'm definitely looking forward to kind of wrangle my parts, like to bring it all in and focus it. So just like you're saying with making the reset, that's a great
Hmm. Hmm.
reminder to start to try that too. When you have this whole big thing that you've made, and it almost starts to sound generative, but it's not. You've just made so many complex relationships that it starts to sound random. That it's great to wrangle it and pull it back and reel it in a little bit, by basically doing these three things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I think I detect a we need to do a Zoom session and go through
yeah,
these things and kind of figure them out, because I can see
yeah. That's a
where
good idea.
you're getting it in a state where the preset is queued but it's not triggering, and I want to find out what's happening there.
Yeah. And then I can try. You can say, yeah, try this. That's a good idea. We should do this in real time, and
Yeah,
instead of just this Google Doc that I keep adding
yeah, yeah.
bullet points to. Yeah. Yeah.
So a comment from the chat: are chance ops over MIDI CCs available in Vector 2? That would be good because my Vector way more than MIDI. So I think what they're asking for is to have some, you can generate CCs, yeah, on those lanes, and
There's three under the
um,
velocity, right? So you have velocity, you
yeah,
hit it again, and you
yeah,
have your first three CCs.
yeah.
I've not been
So I
doing any
guess
of that
having
stuff,
some
but it's very
chance
cool.
ops over those values could be useful, and I would say send me an email, so I'm sure to remember, put it on the big list, and
Oh, chance ops, not
um,
modulation. I was looking at modulation.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
that would be this then. Here are the chance ops
Yeah, there'd
currently.
be some new operation. I've got a list I'm keeping of operations I'd like to add, and I could see doing some things with CCs. Um, cool. Now you're using to get back to the hybrid theme, you're using Bitwig with your system, but if I remember from your videos correctly and some fairly unusual ways. For example, my hybrid system, I'm mixing, but you're
Yeah,
doing a fair
right.
bit of MIDI processing.
I wonder here. Let's do this. I didn't consider this. I'll even just share the Bitwig app.
All
It's
right, hang
very
on, hang
much
on. Let me.
in progress though. In process. Where is the? Oh, it's over here. Share. Nope, that's the full screen, and that's not what I want to share. Oh, can I only share my full screen?
You should be
You
able to
should
pick it
be.
out.
Yeah, if you click the main share button in Zoom,
So it didn't just share a moment ago. I didn't just share
it
my
You
did.
did.
screen.
It did share.
You did.
Okay. There's only one choice, and when I click share, it does the whole screen. So, yeah. Sorry, everybody. I'm not giving my whole screen. Well,
That's all
wait. If
right.
I put
No, no,
Bitwig
we're
full
only seeing one
screen.
app. We're only seeing one app. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Here, let's try this. If I put Bitwig to full screen, this might make it a little better. All right. So let
Yeah.
me
We
just.
just see the one app.
Okay. Well, then that works. So the interface is probably zoomed out a bit right now. So let me see if I can get in here and here it's right there. Yeah, it's on auto. Let's. Oh, that's huge.
It looks great though. Remember, this is going to be squeezed down to 720 on YouTube, so
Oh, true. All right, then
big
maybe.
is good.
Well, all right. Let's go back to the 400 that it went to. All right. Yeah, maybe this is
I
good.
think that's great. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
That's beautiful.
So this is a very disorganized version of what was in my videos, my YouTube videos. And I kind of ripped it all apart. And what I miss, first I'll tell you what's not in here. Um, I miss being able to address each voice um, with its own separate probability. That said, the fact that I've been dedicating chance 2 to global probability, that's it works, and that's why I'm not doing that. But the other thing that I really miss is my little flourish transpose that I do have on that third voice. If you remember in the case, I was able to offset the coarse tune of that. I don't have it for all voices in the case, and so not all voices are going through Bitwig. So I've got the small modular, right? So that is just audio now. There's no MIDI coming in from what's in the case. So that means currently the vector is doing all of the control of that. Bitwig's not taking care of any of that stuff. But what Bitwig is doing is, let's see, there's also a bug with Bitwig where every time I open these, they're all like reset. They're supposed to look like, you go through and you set them like this. So yeah, don't mind that. But these are all my additional effects, right? So I've got a little pre-effects volume control. This is all on the MIDI Fighter Twister variable with bandpass, delay, a little clouds because always, and then just normal stuff there other than an auto pan that I don't use. And then the big modular, which was literally just playing the birds that you heard, the nature sound. This was some mallets that I didn't use at all, but I've been. You can see this pop-up window, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I've been messing around with the new Arturia mallets thing. You may have seen the IG post I put up recently, so that's that was that. But what you were hearing is this bass that I've got. That's a little combination of an upright bass with some synth bass, just kind of filling it out behind. And this does have, let's see, or maybe no, it wouldn't be in the effects. It would be in this side. This does have additional probability on it where I can set, how much filling do I want by how much upright, how much acoustic and how much electric or synth bass do I want. Some other things in there. Then this synths, which is just a bunch of like preset synths. Let's see where they would be here. Yeah, it's just like a selector, where I can press a button on the one controller over here and select a different one of these. So it's a way of just loading in things that are like, hey, I like this sound. Boom, just get to it quickly, which is totally helpful when improvising music. Often what I'll feel is, okay, something needs to change, but I don't know what needs to change. I'm just like, it's time, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's really helpful sometimes to just be able to like hit a button and have that pull up a whole new sound. Totally not the way the modular works, right? With, you have to turn a bunch of dials and kind of remember your little presets. So it's nice to have one preset area. I've got this ensemble that came from my MIDI sprout plant wave days, where I had one stream of data that I wanted to split up probabilistically throughout a bunch of different instruments. So when I showed my phone to the screen there, to the camera, with the little sliders on the Touch OSC app, that is what controls a lot of these controls. In fact, I might just show it controls all of this stuff. So
Wow.
the probability that each one of those voices, that's the chances here, the probability that each one of those voices might play, in addition to all of them, their individual volumes, and then certain um, timbral and articulation uh, art, articulation characteristics for each of those. So I can just kind of set up this thing to send one monophonic sequence from the vector. I just send a monophonic sequence, and it just kind of like randomly plays throughout different parts. I brought up the phone. I didn't even have it open when I started because it was playing originally. It was when I started. I guess it was playing like marimbas, maybe some harp, just kind of quietly. But then I switched over to the voice. So I brought the voice all the way up, and you can see that the chances now on the other ones, piano, are a little lower. I guess marimba I raised up again later there too. But so it's got all of those, and then they have the standard effects rack that I put on everything else. So there's like a delay and a clouds basically, and that's one of the main things that I'm manipulating. Like every voice, I might be pitching it up or down in clouds and running it either fully wet or some sort of mix of it, and then manually, gesturally changing the density control, which is like how it's dividing up those grains, which is kind of a timing thing. None of it's synced, none of it's clock synced. It's all just manually like, let's feel it, let's get it, to the spot. Um, just because VCV rack clouds is like impossible to sync or not sync. Like you can't use a sequential switch to switch whether it is. If it's patched in, it's going to be triggered via triggers and it can't go unsynced. And so I've never, figured out a way to, I guess, use two separate instances of clouds and use a switch to switch between those probably. So there's that. And then lastly, the last thing is just this morphogene, which was, that actually was the big modular. I realized the big modular I didn't use. That was the SH101 into some effects up there, but I never played it. I had something planned that I might do. I had a little bass sequence I was going to play in a slow ARP that was triggered from the big modular. But so that's really all that's happening in here, other than some fancy recording channels that are like grabbing the signal at a bunch of different places, right? Like recording the MIDI and recording the mix of the channel, but also the pre-effects of the channel in case I'm just like, all right, that really messed that up, but I want to save this like amazing thing that happened. I could take the automation from the effects and reapply it to the audio that was recorded pre-effects. So these are like safety channels, which is probably why my system was glitching out, because there's like, I don't know how many there are here, but you see there's a lot of them. So yeah, that's the setup.
Cool.
Very nice. So a mix of a few extra instruments and mostly mixing and channel processing, some effects. Um, I mean, and obviously, yeah, and you've got a lot of controllers set up. So here, let me highlight that for everybody. So yeah, so you're not poking around on the computer while you're playing. You know.
I had to do it once to make the voice louder. It wasn't loud enough for everybody else. I had to use the trackpad to just
Yeah.
bring that fader up a bit. But other than that, yeah, it's no computer and no eyes on the computer either. It's just it feels like hardware. And I guess that's the point. Is this current iteration of this case? Um, it's larger than the one in the hybrid videos. Um, it's because I wanted a fully self-contained three-voice system that I didn't have to use the computer for. So I
Mhm.
can get
Mhm.
away with making music with this. I just don't have some of those extra things that are in the computer. And it kind of occurred to me, well, if I'm doing this live stream from the studio, why don't I use the studio? Like, why don't I, like I don't have to have just a performance, portable thing here. Uh, but really, my hands are on this most of the time. Not all of this first page is mapped because it's the same mappings from the video series. But these are my clouds controls over here for multiple channels, and then same thing for some of the other channels here. The top two is the synth's voice, some extra parameters of macros. There's like 4 macros the way I've organized. This is actually worth noting. There's that preset device, right? There's I push a button and I get a different preset sound from a selector channel.
Mhm.
All of those presets are separate plugins. And so I've organized them all to have 4 available parameters. M1, M2, M3, M4, sort of like, certain plugin manufacturers, they're, software folks, they tend to make like 4 macros available. I made a bunch of presets for GeForce, and that's how they do their stuff, right? Pigments, I'm using pigments, Arteria pigments mostly in this rack, and so I organized that the same way. So that makes it so that M1 is, or wait, not that one. M1, M2 is press and turn, M3, and M4. And so M1 and M3 then are sort of my attack and release, or my rise and fall for a lot of those sounds. And then the ones hidden under tend to be more like this one's timbral, and then this one's like reverb delay type
Mhm.
effects. So I've
Mhm.
not everything is exactly the same between each preset, but they're all close enough that if I switch to one, I can quickly shape it. You know, that's a sharp sound that has some sustain. This is a slow sound that also, yeah, attack and or rise and fall. And then there's just this little mixer, and that's actually my level control. So currently this is like the entire modular, and then the 3 voices that are in the computer,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
the big modular right now. But that's
Mhm.
all going to be changed yet again. I really liked the way it was in the hybrid system videos that I made this year, that earlier in the year, where each voice is split out in here, and is hey, listen to that. Is Oh yeah, this is the one I never brought in. This was the new marimba plugin from Arturia. I forgot it had a cool thing going. It was sharing the sequence from the Just Friends voice. Oh yeah, and while we're here, this little guy, the Arc, is sending LFOs from Ansible going through the Quad 10 because it's easier to attenuate that way than to use the key combo on there. Um, and that's my only LFO style modulation, for the case, is just with Arc there. And so the 3 voices each have some sort of timbral control.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's different for each one, but some sort of bright, dark thing that I can cycle and get moving. And really,
Mhm.
creatively, I end up either using it slowly to make it move to where you're not noticing it, or I use it really fast so that it's yeah, blah, 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 and I just kind of like that kind of sound. Yeah.
Well, before we move on, I want to show a couple images from the Lightbath YouTube channel, and he's been doing a series. I think there are now 3 of these videos up, and
Yeah.
a lot of interesting techniques that you can use to create a hybrid system, or if you already have a hybrid system, ways to augment it. Um, and we'll come back to these again at the end. Um, But let me, well, while I'm here, I guess I will go ahead and show my own system, which is hybrid,
Yeah, I
at
am
least
so
lately.
curious.
Yeah.
We all use these we all have this hybrid approach, and all I know so far about everybody else's approaches is that it's different than what I'm doing. So this is going to be great.
Yeah, so this started a few years ago. I can't remember if it was Chris's idea or mine, but we were talking about doing a show in Santa Fe and decided we wanted to do quad sound. And I know for me, that was kind of the like, okay, I've got to do a laptop-based mixer to do that. And I tried a few different things actually, and then ended up on numerology because I know the software well and the routing's flexible enough. I could build some quad ping pong delays and quad panners, and it works just fine. You know, feeding one bus to the main speakers and an alternate bus. And I actually don't use. I will occasionally use a sequencer in it if I'm doing something specific. So there's a trick I like to use where I'll have 4 or 6 monophonic sequences running slightly out of phase with different lengths, feeding a chord patch to build a very like, was it like track 2 or 3 on Music for Airports, that trick.
Yeah.
And that's a nice way to build an ambient background patch.
Oh,
But
cool.
I don't send or receive sync with the laptop. Everything is sequenced on the vector. Um, I've got 2 to 3 parts in the main case. Usually, like right now, that the leftmost module is a Weston dual oscillator, and I feed that into a CP3 style mixer, and then at the left-hand side of the SF1 filter, and that's one voice. And then I've got the beehive to the right of the filter module feeding the other half of that filter
Mm.
um, for a secondary voice, and then the bitbox right now is just a placeholder. It's either, well, I'm going to a trade show in January, so it'll probably stay so I can have some drums. And sometimes I use it in the case for drums. Sometimes I use samples on numerology for drums. I send MIDI through MIDI 1 out to the audio interface, which is sitting under the laptop. That's a Focusrite Claret 4 pre. Um, and then the other main analog voice is a 2 oscillator AJH mini mod voice, and it's a little weird because the envelopes are in the main case, and then I've got 2 oscillators in the filter and an auxiliary case. And I'll use that both for bass lines, and I will also sometimes use it for paraphonic chords. Um, and then I've got the Launchpad for preset selection, and I do my live arrangements just by selecting presets. Chris
Mm.
uses scenes, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then I've got the launch control for mapped MIDI parameters. Some of those are effects levels. About half of it actually is effects levels, and the other half has to do with the instrument, and use that as kind of a live guitar, quote, quote, guitar playing. And that's running into a synth plugin on the Mac. I'm using Xenology Pro for that with a GR300, a heavily modified GR300 patch, and some Valhalla effects, Valhalla delay, and Valhalla shimmer. And and then if I'm performing, like the pieces are fairly well laid out in presets and pre-composed, and I'm mostly just adjusting the mix with the knobs and filter cutoffs, and then playing on the instrument, and then triggering new. I don't use scenes to trigger new scenes. What I'll do is on the preset page of the Launchpad, you can use the right-hand column to trigger a whole row of presets. So I'll do that.
Oh, cool. Right.
Yeah, and then I can then, if necessary, adjust presets manually within there. Um, and that's basically it. The Claret has 4 outputs, so I'll run those into the mixer for quad, or if I'm playing on a stereo system, I can adjust the mix so that it's a stereo out. And then the case size for the main case is a certain size because it fits in my padded roller bag, so that goes on the airplane with me. And then the instrument is the short one, so it'll actually fit in my backpack with the laptop. And then pretty much everything else goes in a checked bag. And So that's kind of, and that was also an advantage of going hybrid, is you can build a smaller system if you're traveling. And I know a lot of people, particularly a lot of vector users, are traveling a lot, and it can be really helpful to have extra synths on a laptop. And I also use you've been using FM8 for percussion voices and some pads, and I've been using Xenology for pads. So that's what I've been using for polysynths. Let me get back to the camera here. Where did it go? I often use a Roland MC101 as a polysynth, and I have in the past
Cool.
used also Helix HX Stomp for effects and a few other things, kind of cycle in and out. But for me, the main impetus in going hybrid was to be able to mix in quad, and it's a lot of fun to play in quad. And in the studio, I've got 4 of these Evo 65s for monitoring, and I thought that was fancy. And then Chris built a new studio, which you guys can see a little bit of.
And
When
we
we
can
get to that.
see behind him,
Yeah,
his
yeah,
rear channels.
yeah. So he took surround. Like I'm happy with 4 speakers and some unusual delays and pans to get things going. And his setup is getting a little more sophisticated in that regard. Um, so let me bring up Chris. I'll bring up which system should I bring up first?
Bring up the portable system first. I think that'd be
Okay, so let's bring up
real
the
discussion
portable
of why it went
system.
hybrid. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, let me zoom
Yeah,
this in
because
for everybody.
during COVID, I did a lot of streaming out of the full studio, so I could use my keyboards and all that jazz while I was playing live. And as COVID started to lift and we started playing out again, I wanted to have the sound of my full studio in something I could carry onto an airplane. And that's what drove me down the hybrid route. I couldn't bring full keyboards with me anymore. I needed to rely on VSTs in the laptop when I wanted to play chordal sections, and couldn't bring a full mixer with me. So instead, I just have a mixed controller out of picture. On this one, I'm using a Behringer X Touch with its 8 faders, and in the studio, I use a PreSonus Faderport 16. So there we go. I can see how the full setup really is laid out around me with the laptop. And like Brian, I try to not touch the laptop while I'm playing. I set up everything ahead of time. Everything I want to touch while playing is in the modular case. And the laptop is where I'm doing all of the mixing and a lot of the effects. Again, effects I want to touch in real time or play around with, like Starlab, Vino Echo, a really cool stereo echo with reversing, beads, stereo filter are all inside the modular case. So the way that this has been set up is sync is coming from the laptop through USB to the vector because I wanted to use drum loops as well. So those are launched inside Ableton Live, and they're already on Ableton Live's grid markers. So I wanted to have that as my main clock going into the vector sequencer as well. I used to have a bit box in the live case, but I need to make room for other things. And I'm going through an Expert Sleepers ES9. I'm using all the outputs and all the inputs. A lot of them are to take voices directly out of the modular system, including I've got a few different rings and pluck and type voices. Yeah, there's the ES9 tangle of cables going in and out of it to show how mad it is. But I'm also running 3 stereo effects sends and returns from the laptop through the modular and then back into the laptop for mixing.
Yeah.
So I can do a lot of stuff with it. Yeah, that's a good one. The Star Lab and the Vino Echo down there at the bottom. Originally, I was just using plugins on the laptop when I wanted to play chordal passages or really, really slow arpeggios of strings and things like that. But I had, as Brian mentioned earlier, a little disaster during performance where I accidentally touched structure on rings during the middle of performance, and it suddenly became a microtonal performance. And after that gig, started doubling all of my modular voices with plugins in the laptop. Since the Vector can send CV gate and MIDI simultaneously for each of its parts, that made it possible for me to go ahead and play stuff in the modular case, but have a backup voice inside the laptop, just underneath the mute switch on my mix controller. So if things got screwed up, I could unmute and mute the bad part, unmute the backup part in the laptop, and everything would be good.
You can literally A B. You can just like go to the B, the understudy.
Yes.
In the computer.
Yeah, for anything. So every part that's in the vector is also duplicated with a part on VST inside the laptop. And I've got a mix controller with
Wow.
mutes for the tracks. And I can just
Yeah.
go ahead and mute and unmute whether I want to hear the modular voice, I want to hear the laptop voice, or if I want to hear the both of them together for different sections of the song.
Wow.
And that's worked out well for creating more full orchestrations. Um, so I've got a few rings and plucks and things like that for various voices in there. Then I've got a couple patched voices. Currently, I'm using a Victor oscillator into a WMD filter as one voice, and then I'm using a Modbap Osiris into an IntelliJ Polaris for the other voice that's inside the case, in addition to all the pluck stuff. And then the upper right corner of the case is a whole bunch of percussion modules, and I will occasionally do percussion stuff inside the case as well. And I've got a bunch of WMD stuff in addition to Plonk from IntelliJ and a good old fashioned noise source and low pass gate in the upper right corner for I do noise splashes and things like that. The biggest hassle with this system is latency. That's the big bugaboo about running a hybrid system. The more complex my project gets on the laptop, and it gets really complex with quad panners, the more delay there is in Ableton Live from audio in to audio out. So Ableton Live has a provision where I can say, okay, send MIDI clocks ahead of the beat. And that way the vector sequencer is actually firing earlier than the laptop is to compensate for the audio delay of going through the laptop. This kind of rules out playing the really pointillistic or percussion stuff live on the modular.
Yeah.
So my workaround for that is like, Jim, I've got a Focusrite 4 pre. You see the red box there underneath. And it has 4 inputs and a built-in mixer. So anything I need to play with no delay, such as an additional keyboard, or I'll bring hand percussion and a microphone sometimes, goes into additional inputs on the 4 pre and is mixed directly into the outputs, not going through the laptop. So there's no delay on those parts.
But since not being processed through the DAW, not being processed through Ableton.
Well, not directly, but Ableton can see all those inputs, so I can still send them through effects on. Yeah. And then still get the reverb and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. That's a good solution.
Yeah, it's actually a really nice trick is to have that direct submix for things you're going to play live.
Yeah, if you're playing keyboards live, or I play hand percussion sometimes. And I think the other thing that's made my life a lot easier is the mix controllers that I use are based on the Mackie interface. So they're all flying fader interfaces. As I switch between banks of faders, they jump to the position that those tracks are currently on with little LED pads above them telling me the track names for each of those tracks. It's not unusual for me to run up to 24 to 30 stereo tracks during a performance.
That's such a juggle.
But being able to switch banks quickly makes that easier. Yeah.
So what's your buffer size that you end up having to run?
It's usually 256. I might go to 512 sometimes, but usually it's 256.
Wow. Trying to record on my computer and do this stream, apparently 512 wouldn't cut it. I think I should switch to 512. So, it seemed appropriate, right? I mean, 512.
Yeah, I cut it as low as I can to get that latency out. And I do run everything at 96K too, by the way.
Oh, wow. Well, that helps that helps your latency. It might
yes,
not help
it does.
the CPU, but it helps the latency.
It halves the latency to the system.
Okay, yeah.
And I guess the only other thing is I'm using the Ableton push to either trigger loops or long samples, but then I'll also switch it into its isomorphic keyboard mode and then use it as a keyboard when I need to play live keyboard parts. And again, because of the crazy delay through the laptop, particularly when I'm running a lot of surround channels, is I tend to play things with very slow attacks. And I have to play ahead of the beat so that it fades up in time. Anything that's very transient based has to be sequenced or done directly in the modular.
So then that delay that is set up in order to make this work, with the sending the MIDI early is like half a second or something. It's probably pretty.
It depends. It's usually at least in the 40 to 60 millisecond range. Okay. But when I start adding lots of quad panners on, because I about half my gigs are in quad as well. I'm using the surround panner. It's like Ableton Live. It's based on the Max for Live patch, which means it's very inefficient. I'll be up to like the 250, 260 millisecond pre-delay sending MIDI clocks ahead of time.
I wonder if Christopher Willett's device for the envelope, I wonder if that might be able to be used for quad and if it would be more efficient.
I'm
What
curious
are you
about
checking?
envelope. I've looked at that. I'm going to start trying the SPAC panners actually from Earcom
Hmm.
because I heard Sensor play, and it was some of the best separation I've ever heard in quad was them using the SPAC plugins from Earcom. So I'm going to try moving over to those.
Nice.
The nice thing about the quad panners inside Ableton Live is that you can modulate them with LFOs and things like that inside Live.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
can set up timed things to make stuff auto pan around the room and things like that.
What's the iPad doing?
The iPad are my performance notes. That's my score.
Yeah, I have
So
a book that I haven't changed yet. It's same notes that I look at just to find my way around
I
Morphogene.
used to have like, masking tape and post-it notes all over the modular. And I eventually just realized, hell, just type them into notes and throw them up on the iPad. And I use like in red colors things that I need to remind me,
Yeah.
change this parameter or whatever, or don't miss this. And then the rest is just reminding me of where I am in a performance and what I need to bring up and bring down.
And you said this is carry on. How does what's this look like when it's packed up? Tell me.
Yeah. So I had a custom build modular case by Jason Fink, Amanda Fink cases that's actually 94 HP wide. And otherwise it's, I guess it's a 16U case, 12, yeah, well, 14U case. Because
Yeah.
I looked at all the airline regulations in the US as to what's the maximum width case for carry on, and it worked out actually to be a 94 HP case rather than 104. So I had a custom made
Maximize the
case.
HP as best
You
you
bet.
can.
And I had those
Yeah.
1U rows and things like that. And so
Yeah.
that's in carry on. The
Okay.
laptop goes into my personal item when I go on an airplane.
Yeah.
And then the other items like the mix controllers, the additional Focusrite interface, um, the little arms are coming out to hold up the launch pad and the iPad, those themselves, all those cables, the foot switches, all go into a mixer case that gets checked.
Okay. So that's not a pellet. I mean, I might be getting into details that no one cares about, but I've just noticed I have like a checked bag style Pelican case,
Yeah.
but it is so heavy, and
Yeah. And that just
Pelican is
came up
just
in the
heavy.
question too about how much does all that weigh?
Yeah. So what? Yeah, that's my question.
I'm using
You
a
know,
Gator mixer case and it's actually pretty lightweight.
so more
It's,
like SKB style, that
yeah.
thinner,
Yeah. Even
hollow
thinner
style.
than that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not going to survive a truck running over it.
Right. It's
Unlike,
not like a Pelican,
yeah,
but
not like a
yeah,
Pelican case that you can use to
you
hold a
can
truck
lift
on
it
an
with.
incline or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's padded inside, and then I have additional foam inserts around everything that I've custom cut, so everything's packed really firmly, nothing shifts inside.
Now, what about the stands? Do you just like use a table or and not
Yeah,
bring the stands?
yeah.
Yeah,
When I'm traveling, I rely on tables or stands at wherever I'm going. I tell them ahead of
yeah,
time what stands I could use.
yeah,
When I did a little mini tour in North Carolina, I guess it's about a year ago at this point, it actually worked out cheaper for me to buy and have
yeah.
Sweetwater ship ahead the
Right.
main stand to my first gig. I picked it up at the first gig and then carried it in my rental car after that. And then I raffled it off at that last gig.
Very cool. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like for things like that, even any rental fees, if a rental company even has it, it's just yeah, you just buy it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But all the
Wow.
other
That
stands are basically
that
heavy duty projectors slash sheet music stands. So they're pretty easy
yeah.
to borrow while I'm on the road.
Okay. Right. You can get away with music stands if needed,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a projector stand table kind of thing. Okay.
And like Jim was noticing, the launch pad in the upper left is mainly for me doing scene changes for presets where I'll switch all the parts together. Um, Sometimes I'll do preset changes like Jim does. I'll do individual preset changes, but quite often my things are organized by scenes. And because I usually have a lot of stuff happening on downbeats, my stuff's much more funk groove oriented. So I really try to hit downbeats as opposed to having asynchronous stuff running.
Jamming on
Uh,
the one.
yeah, I have Ableton Live set up to give me a 2 bar pre-cue, and the Vector up until today only had a 1 bar pre-cue, but now it's got a 2 or 4 bar pre-cue. So
Nice.
I can call up new scenes, new samples, and everything on my gear before the downbeat, and then hit the downbeat with like hand percussion or whatever as well. So that's a lot of fun.
And that ends up being a two-hand thing, right? Where the launch pad that's connected for the uninitiated here to the vector sequencer. The vector
Yes.
sequencer interfaces with these launch pads, and that's why everyone you may have seen with with vector sequencers seems to use launchpads. It
Yeah,
it
great.
uncovers a lot of things. Yeah, exactly. So like one hand launches your scene on for the vector, and then another hand might launch a scene on the push for stuff in Ableton. Is that how that works?
Yeah, in Ableton, I don't launch whole scenes. I'll tend to launch individual samples. I have a lot of
Okay, right.
percussion loops, and sometimes I'll use follow actions for it to automatically go between different loop variations.
Yeah.
I'll trigger long ambient samples or long vocals over on the launch pad, excuse me, over on the push, or I'll be playing keyboard parts over there.
So then a lot of the brain of things still is the vector sequencer here then.
Vector sequencer is the brain of everything. I don't do any sequencing in live. The
Yeah.
vector will actually play everything, either VSTs in the launch in the laptop or the modules inside the case.
Yeah.
A question from the chat is how long a set can you do with this setup?
I've done a 1 hour set so
24
far.
hours.
Yeah, 20 hours. I've done like a 1 hour highly composed set with a setup, and looking at ways of stretching that more. I think I need to start bringing some additional keyboards or whatever to get some more sounds to make it more interesting, because I like to change timbres quite a bit. Oh, and someone asked weight. I can get it underneath the 50-pound limit if I have to for the check case. Um, it's nicer if I travel somewhere that has a 70-pound limit, like Southwest Airlines, and then I'll get up over 60 pounds with a check case sometimes.
Mm. Yeah, with my Pelican case, that's half of that's the case.
Yeah.
So I'm always coming up onto that limit.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see to compare and contrast approaches here, if that's all right. I in noticing this, like the amount of prepared sequences that I have, if they were just played, could probably get me a set that lasts about 10 minutes, maybe. Maybe if I'm lucky, 5 probably. And I'm not really exaggerating, but then the manipulation is what takes it further. And so yeah, I strived, all this to say, I strive to reach a level of internal vector sequencer organization to what you've got there. I feel I can get away. If I could get 30 minutes of launched stuff, I can stretch that out. I could get 2 hours out of that.
Yeah, you can improvise inside sections. I tend to have a low threshold of boredom when I'm playing, and after I'm done something for several measures, I'm like, I better change this. I have to do something new here.
Yeah.
But that's where chance operations on the vector come in really handy.
Yeah.
And then I have a pair of ornament and crimes running my calibrator firmware in them that allow me to do transpositions that can be synchronized to measure lines or whatever, and that helps quite a bit as well.
Explain that. What is this?
I had Phaser, DJ Phaser, write some custom firmware for me for ornament and crime.
Yeah.
Where it has 4 channels as most basic quantizers with scales. But then I also have used the 2 encoders for semitone and octave offsets. And then I use the trigger inputs to go ahead and hold off those offsets if I desire until the trigger hits, and then load up the new transpositions.
So it's like super Quantermain. It's like a version of Quantermain.
Yeah,
cool.
Very
That's what
high
I'm
performance
using
oriented.
in mine too.
And the other thing the calibrator has on it is also it adjusts the tuning of the individual oscillators. It has less than 1 cent offset accuracy. It can also tilt for things that don't track very well. So
that's what I was using for years. Ever since Mogfest 2018, I started running all of my voices through. I'm not doing it in this case, but because it's MIDI addressed. But all CV voices would go through Quantermain just because it was the most accurate. I could get the best tuning. So is that what you're saying? It's basically just quantizing to the semitone, or is it?
Oh no, quantizing is also bending, because I have a lot of oscillators or sound sources that don't track each other more than a couple octaves. They'll drift off from each other if I'm doing stuff.
Yeah.
So it actually can tilt the CV coming out either sharp or flat as you go up.
I know what you mean now. Like when you're working in, for example, in Bitwig, there's a hardware CV instrument and device, and yeah, you see that if you manually tune it, it'll tilt. Yeah,
like the AJHV scale. AJHV scale will do that too. Like, are you going sharp or flat as you go up the scale, basically?
Right. Yeah.
And I find quite often, because the knobs on a lot of modules, particularly like the 2HP modules, can be so damn touchy that I'll just leave them alone and do all my tuning from my ornament and crimes, because I have sub-cent tuning control in there and presets.
How can I get a hold of this?
It's free. Go to DJ Phaserville, and it's part of the Phaserville suite.
Oh, I love it because that tilt is basically what I'm missing. Because yeah, I'll switch octaves, and yeah, the note is perfectly in tune. The CV is what it's supposed to be, but it's not what the oscillator needs. So
Yeah,
great,
exactly.
great.
My big
Okay.
modular studio modular actually has, I think I'm up to 6 ornamented crimes, all running calibrator.
Yeah.
So, so that I know each of my sound sources are going to always track each other. Yeah, there's the
Yeah.
big system.
I thought I was extreme for having two of them.
Yeah, if you look on the right, you'll see a group of 6 black modules along the left edge of it. Those are my ornamented
Yeah.
crimes running calibrator running to all of my sound sources, so I can keep all of them tracking each other. So I can just mix and match
Cool.
freely and know that everyone's going to track each other.
Love it.
Yeah, there's like over 20 oscillators in the big system and things like that. So
Yet again, I thought I was extreme. This is beyond, beyond,
well, I
beyond.
have to give a shout out to Travarsy because when I decided to go hybrid, she had already been going hybrid before me. And I said, look, I need some tips on how to do this. And she gave me some basic advice. And then when she saw what I came back with and what everything I was doing, she says, man, your rig scares me. I would never do that much.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It on the topic of hybrid systems being scary for live performance and traveling. I I my the reason why I started designing the hybrid system in the first place in that first hybrid video from 2020 was yeah, I had a European tour scheduled before COVID happened, which ended up canceling it, and it never happened. And I lost my flight credit for that, and I'm pretty sore about that. But that's a side note. But so I wanted to be able to fit on a small carry, like the international style carry
Yeah.
on, and on flights where you don't even know what you're gonna get to do, And so I really wanted a small system that could fit inside of a Pelican case.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that the case I was using, the MDR case, wouldn't fit inside of a Pelican. I later learned that the ALM 84 HP ALM case slides
Mm.
perfectly in the Pelican carry-on. So for anybody, that was going to be a future uh, hybrid system video
Yeah,
where I
because
talk about that.
84 HP fits inside a standard rack, 19-inch rack width.
Right. Yeah. And so the reason for putting together the hybrid was in order to travel, but then there's this peace of mind when you have a hardware system and it's just hardware, and you just show up and you plug your case in and you plug out of your case, and maybe you have a mixer or something, and that's all you need. It's just reliable. Like it's gonna work. You don't have any configuration to do. There's no mapping, like so that was kind of why I went back to this potential all hardware version and not just everything needing Bitwig to go through or the computer to go through, the audio interface to go through.
Yeah,
So
ironically, that's where I was beforehand. Is I had a case that basically, plug in here, I'm done, I'm ready to play, and I would live patch inside the modular, no laptop required. The mixer, big WMD performance mixer, was inside the case,
yeah.
and I would just do all improv, and basically would be the drummer improvising with other people. And I played with Jim quite a bit. We would play as Meridian Alpha as a duo, where we would do that quite a bit. Um, but then COVID changed me because I couldn't jam with others anymore. I had to do the whole thing by myself in the studio, and I got so used to doing that. Now I'm off in this other vein of doing heavily composed stuff as opposed to just improvising. And then
Yeah.
that's when I went hybrid.
So how does it feel? Are you afraid every time you turn it all on, or do you have it pretty much to a point where you don't get the fear?
I don't get the fear.
Yeah.
The only the only problems I've had besides touching the wrong knob and rings is
Rings
Ableton
has
Live.
bitten us all.
Yeah,
So
hasn't it? I've got googly eyes on my knobs.
yeah,
Do not touch. Just
yeah.
staring back at me. Leave me alone. Um, the biggest problem I've had in live performance is Ableton Live loading another project. I've had it hang up loading a brand new project. So I've had to change my live performances now to where everything is in one massive Ableton Live project. And I bank switch on the
Oh,
faders and things like that, or I'm pushed to get over to the controls for a different piece if I have
you
to.
were opening projects during performance to
Well,
that's
I did that one tour and then I learned my lesson.
yeah. No thanks. Wow. That's like here. Let me just swap out this module for a second. Here, just hold
Yeah.
on. Let me.
Yeah,
put in
but
my other
it could
LFO.
definitely all go wrong, and and there was definitely a lot of trepidation because laptops in particular are known for having stage fright.
Yeah,
And but touch wood, I've built a lot of redundancies into the system, like everything in the modular being backed up in the laptop.
yeah,
But since I'm doing the mixing in the laptop, yes, I'm screwed. If the laptop goes down, I am screwed.
yeah.
Having a few hours before go time to set up. I mean, it doesn't take a few hours, but having that extra time in case there's a
Yeah.
problem really helps.
This was what if anyone is watching this that went to South by Southwest when I did the Plant Wave performance, I requested 3 hours and I was not given those 3 hours, and people were waiting around the corner in a long line, and technical things were not happening right with the Plant Wave stuff and my stuff, and it was the most stressful thing. Yeah, exactly. Just being like, I'm going to show up in the afternoon. I'm going to get as much time as needed. It's not just a line check situation here. We're going to really get this working and feel the room and be comfortable in it. Yeah.
And that's a challenge because so many modular performances have multiple performers with 15-minute at maximum switchovers
Yeah.
between the performers.
Yep.
And then I've spent some time hanging out with Steve Roach, and he's like, "No, I need to get in the room at 10 in the morning and lock
Yes.
out until it
Yeah.
starts." He has a very different mentality. Like, no, this is what I
Yeah.
need to tune to the room and learn the reverb and the echo times in the room, stuff like that. I played a gig recently that Jim was mixing, where we basically set me all up on a table in the green room and had
Yeah.
these long tethered cables, the audio and AC always plugged in. It was time for me to go on. We just brought the whole table out and put into a video cube, and I played from there and then moved the whole thing back out again.
Because if you unplug, it's a do-over, like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I played the following night and I had a 5 minute delay because I lost power and had to retune everything. But
Oh,
fortunately, Chris was there and he could give a little lecture about Tangerine Dream tuning before shows. So
That's
yeah,
good.
I was reading Eric Fose's recent biography. He said in the early days, crowds would go crazy because like they come on stage and they start twiddling knobs and there'd be no sound for 15 minutes because they're busy tuning the system up again.
They're just tuning.
And that
Not
and that's
even
part
making sequences,
no
just
sound at all,
tuning.
right? Just
Just
tuning.
trying to get the thing to work.
And that's a couple of tricks I use live now actually is since I do use the laptop, I have a software tuner on every track inside the
Yeah.
laptop.
Same
So
same for me.
I can
Yeah.
see that at a glance, and I've actually built a special sequence I call the tuning sequence that just puts out the root note over and over again for every single part.
Right.
So I mute the main output, bring up the tuning sequence, and just go through the tracks and tweak as I need. Okay, I'm done. Unmute the master, and then go to the first sequence.
Yeah. I think Nick from Sylvanesso has something like that too. I got to hang out after when I was living in Bend when they came by and played a show at the amphitheater there, and I remember something. There's a fancy tuning setup that he has going on with his setup because his setup is pretty extensive. There's a lot of things. I mean, all the music that is happening with Sylvanesso is happening from him, and the show won't just play if he's not there doing things. So it's an active thing. But yeah, I think he's got some fancy thing that's not just tuning. Like it's also fun, and I I think I heard it. I guess I heard it during soundcheck. I think that's what it was. I was currently with broken foot at the time, so I got there really early, and I was sitting in the special needs area. So yeah, lots of time to pay attention to what's going on stage. So I'm
cool.
curious, Jim.
Yes.
I want to know a little bit now. We've heard about Chris's setup here, though.
Mhm.
I want to know more about how yours is set up. We now know like what yours is.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about? Do we have time? What are we?
Well, we
what,
can.
what's
I
going?
can bring it back up, and you can ask me some questions. So let
Okay,
me.
unless some of the viewers have some specific questions, and prioritize them because I can
Yeah.
ask you questions anytime.
Let me check. Let's see.
While Jim's
We're
going through
okay.
that, I have to say, Brian, I really liked how you have so many controls pre-mapped to things to adjust it. I'm getting more into learning, try to how to fake presets with my modular, and I found that my big friend are utility mixers with switches, so I can switch bias voltages on and off. So for things like rings, I'll set up a bias voltage to structure, and switch that on and off to completely change it and know it's going to land right where I need the structure knob to be, for
Yes.
example.
I've been thinking about it implementing. I saw that Travarsi uses this. The emblematic systems. It's a discontinued module that I think 4MS maybe bought it or took it over. It's emblematic systems has this like fader. It's like a crossfader, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of different presets of offset voltages. The issue I've had with all of that is I haven't figured out how to modulate whatever parameter that I also want to have that offset. I mean, it's just I know what you could do. You'd use a mixer and then you'd have the two
Yeah.
sources coming in, but that just takes up so much space. Like, I feel like a module like that with all those offsets and those presets needs inputs for each channel to be able to put whatever, with attenuation or attenuversion, whatever modulation. So I don't want to just commit to, well, here's my great preset machine, but everybody's frozen in place. Nobody can dance around, nobody can wiggle and move. So
Yeah, you really
yeah,
want the bias to have its own switch to kick the bias on and off. And actually, the Frap Tools
yeah.
321 can do that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but then keep your modulation live on an attenuator, as you say,
Yeah,
to modulate as well and have those mixed together.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Jim. You're just
No
So
worries.
some,
yeah,
No, I mean, that kind of gets back to what I noticed about Brian's rig was I thought all those knobs at the top were levels, but they're actually uh, basically CV controls.
well, actually, here, flip over for a second and
Yeah.
I realize it's worth saying that for a
yeah, walk
second.
through those.
Yeah, so left to right here, these three are those CV offsets for pitch. This used to be one for a fourth voice, but it ends up being um, FM enveloping from the mix out of Just Friends, basically. So the main envelope, what's the equivalent of the envelope for the voice, so that I can move the filter cutoff. Then these are actually they're two pairs for each of the distings. So I have two parameters that I can control on each of those distings. This has been changing around. Right now, this is length and like the equivalent of timbre or whatever. And then these are two timbral controls. I guess, what is it on Platts? What are the two main controls? Timbre and morph. These are basically timbre and morph. And then these are level controls. These are my three main voices. You know, pre-effects VCA basically. And then what is this one? I forget. I changed it recently. It's coming from this, so it must be modulation from the quadrax that's going into uh don't know actually. Oh no, wait. No, that doesn't make sense. It's one of the blue cables. That's all I can tell you.
Chris, I think we need to turn Brian on to our favorite right angle cables.
Yeah, seriously, how much lower this could be if that were the case, that would be yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we both use Luigi's mini pars these days, so I can
Huh?
patch the whole thing and keep my case closed.
Yeah. I mean, I can close the case with this, but it's just hard to reach
Oh
certain
yeah,
knobs.
and I've recently come up with some cable clips that actually my wife now sells on on eBay to help me organize things as well. They're called chaos clips.
Oh yeah, I started doing the snake thing where I just wind everybody together, but I used to use those little actually I have one here. I used to use these little things everywhere, these little twisty
Oh yeah, yeah.
available on the Lightbath Mall, bit.ly/Lightbath Mall. That's actually is true. It is my Amazon
Yeah,
store,
I have
but
little bands of Velcro for that purpose. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I've got a couple of the clips right above the QVL and the Quadra, and those I kind of a bunch of cables. They're mostly blue and purple, so you can't quite see them well in this image.
Oh, they mount on the screws on the.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense. Then you do have a channel there. Yeah, I try
Yes.
to channel everything by wrapping it this way, but those actually keep them. Okay, I see how that's super useful. I like that.
I, and then
A
I've
lot.
designed them so they're straight on one side, so they don't go past the edge of the case, but rounded on the other side to hold more cables.
Oh, cool.
Okay. So Brian, you had questions about my setup.
So what I'm curious about, I get the idea. There's these what is it? Three voices. Well, there's the dual
Yeah,
oscillator. There's the mutable, and then there's the AJ. Wait, AJH. What are they?
yeah,
Oh yeah.
AJH, yeah.
Um, a friend of mine plays drums in the band AJR, and so when I think AJ, I want to say AJR. Okay, so what are you doing when controlling things? Like how, because Chris is talking about how it's kind of like launch the things and DJ it
Mhm,
basically, and I
mhm,
think that's
mhm.
what I heard you getting at earlier. This is kind of like launch the things, small amount of shaping, and then jam out on the live instrument, so the instrument, like that's
I
kind
mean,
of
that's
the
that's it to some extent. Usually, there ends up being a fair bit of shaping regarding filter cutoffs and levels, and also, of course, as sections change. For example, I was in the last piece. I was using the beehive into the right hand side of the SF1 filter in basically a Vactral type setup where the level part of
yeah.
the amp envelope was set open, and then I was using a wide filter envelope with a very with no sustain, basically attack release tuned for percussion. And I had to make a few changes for that between sections, so there's some maintenance in terms of that.
And that's
Um,
planned out, and then you just get ready for it, and you
yeah,
you do the
yeah,
thing. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's typically some sections that are fairly composed out, and I'm having to wrangle levels and filter cutoffs and things. And then there are some things where it's my choice when to bring things in.
Yeah.
So there maybe is a slow section, and I'll start with I think it was one solo line, and I'll let that run for 2 or 3 bars, or maybe like 4 or 5 bars, and then I'll bring in another part, and then another part, and I'm adjusting reverb levels and filter cutoffs while that's happening, and that gives me, you know, enough control that I feel like I can shape the performance, but not so much where I'm likely to forget things.
Okay.
And
Yeah. That's the
yeah,
juggle. That's the
oh yeah,
balance.
yeah, and then usually a fair bit of playing on the instrument. I enjoy playing it, and for certain types of solo lines and lead lines that I don't want to sequence, and that's the way to go there. Um, like I said, I don't use the scene thing directly. I use preset page a lot, and I should have taken this image with the preset page on. And I tend
Yeah.
to group things. And one thing that's really nice about the Mark II is you get a lot more presets. So before I would have at most 20 presets in a part, and now it's like 44. So I can dedicate, you know, I can now say, okay, this section is going to have more than 4 presets, so I'm going to dedicate an 8 preset page on the launch pad. And actually, I should probably just plug one in. Um, and then, so I know that the top row on any page of presets is the beginning of that section, and it's a
Yeah.
known state.
With space before it or
Yeah,
after, between.
yeah. It's like
Okay.
any parts that need to be muted are muted. Any like background line that needs to be running is running. Um, Let me flip over to
So you're doing a lot of copy paste when you're organizing your presets, then, or do you end up just
yes,
I'm
yes.
composing them
I'm
in the
curious thing
right
because I haven't
spot?
done I haven't actually switched pages yet on presets or on scenes. I'm curious to see this myself.
All right, so I'm going to we're just going to use part one, and we're going to make a bunch of presets. And something that's changed on the Mark II is that they now have the columns are numbered and the rows are labeled, because now you can scroll down quite a bit. So this is a way to keep track of where you are, and then the
Oh, this is
preset
good. Mine
names.
doesn't do that yet. Mine still names them incorrectly. So this will be great.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to
and
that.
now on the launch pad, might need to adjust these colors a little bit, but I think there's kind of there's a little bit of a spectrum going on here. So if I scroll to the top, which is purple, I can trigger A2. This will be A8. Page down 1, and if I hit the right hand button, it'll trigger all these presets, and that
Right.
is go to the preset page. That's the B presets, and then so forth to the C's,
B
D's.
presets for each part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Like all.
this is one part at a time, right? So your
Yeah,
parts
exactly.
are
We're
in
seeing
columns.
one. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
And then I will, if I'm doing a fairly complex arrangement, I'll use the preset playlist. So we're in B1 section. I'll go into
Hmm.
preset edit and I'll say, okay, so B1 will play for 4 bars and then go to
Yeah.
B2 and then B2 will play for 2 bars and then go to B3, right? And so on and so forth. And then that will be different for each of the parts, which is probably the main reason I don't use scenes. Um,
Right. Okay.
and then,
Ableton follow actions for the uninitiated.
yeah,
The
yeah, some
equivalents.
of that. Not quite as sophisticated, but there is some of that idea there.
Right.
And
Not
obviously there's,
probabilistic or. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
adding probability here is certainly a reasonable idea. Um,
that'd be cool.
not necessarily reasonable on my schedule, but we'll get there someday. So I'll trigger this section, and then part one will be down here, and part two may be all the way down here, and then they may both end up down here or like this. And then whenever I'm done with that section, I'll page down and trigger the whole new section, and now I'm in the C area.
Cool.
But wait a minute. I've got some cognitive dissonance here.
Yeah.
Let me try to make sure I. So this is only one part of the time that you were triggering from the launchpad, or you were
Well,
triggering
when all right, so
all
each
parts?
column is a part. So this is
Yes.
part
Okay.
one.
Then I'm on board.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
it's all parts.
yeah.
Yep.
So in this case, this is actually very Ableton. If you think of each of these as 8 tracks,
Yes.
and then these are the buttons on the right where this will trigger
Yeah, the whole scene. Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
row across all 8 parts.
Yes. Okay. I'm with
Now,
you on that.
something this does that I don't like and needs some fine tuning is it will create a preset here. As you see, now these
When it's
are
empty.
non-empty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a bugaboo.
I did
Yeah.
that by accident so many times in preparing for this when I was kind of jamming between four presets. I think when I played on stream, I was probably I may have been selecting them on the vector itself. I kind of go back and forth. But yeah, if you hit the button you didn't mean to do, now your four things that you meant to play are actually one of them is now a silent new one. So yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
like a
It's
way to disable that, I guess.
well, it's the flag for testing whether something is empty gets cleared as soon as you jump to that preset. Um, and I need to change it so that it doesn't get cleared until you actually change something while that preset is active.
Yeah,
So it's
that'd be
just
good.
moving some logic somewhere else,
Hmm.
and I think that'll be a good quality of life improvement. Um, so while we are here, um, I have a couple new things to show.
This is fun.
Let me check the chat, see if I've missed any questions. Oh, there's all kinds of questions. Okay, I think we're okay, reasonably caught up. All right, so Christmas presents. Um, we'll start with Chris's. So for I don't know, years now, but specifically I told him email me every Monday. Um, and what he wants is to sync presets every 2 bars.
Yeah.
So that's now active. In fact, so before it was none, meaning immediate, beat, which is useful in very limited cases, bar, which is the default and is generally useful, and yes, bars are still just 4 beats. Pattern is fairly new. That I think I did that last spring, and this is
Yeah.
for particularly useful for sequences that are, say, 7/8 notes long, or
Yeah.
things that don't match up with bar lines.
I
Mhm.
was a
Uh,
big cheerleader for pattern switching and that kind of stuff because yeah, all of my stuff was phasing upon itself with
yeah, yeah.
what is it called?
So that
Polymetric. Yeah.
yeah, and that works great for that. And then now we have 2 bar, and since it was easy, and I don't know if it's useful, so I don't know if it stays. We have 4 and
Why
an
not
eight
do
bar.
four? Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
always think in 2 bar intervals for some reason, and Ableton Live lets me do it in 2 bar changes. So just helped me with my counting to be able to set something up that far in advance, because then I'm usually turning knobs as well and getting ready for the downbeat.
Yeah, breathing room. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of my mistakes in live performance were triggering things on the wrong bar. And
Mm.
suddenly, like, something's one bar out, the vector be one bar out from where Ableton Live was. And that would be interesting.
Yeah.
It still sounded great.
So, well, no one else has the score to follow along. So,
Yeah, yeah.
That just sounds like my music, where it's just off. It's just abstract. It's intentional.
no,
Yeah.
thank you, Jim. Greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome, and I'll have this build ready in the next few days. And then over on the right hand side, if nobody noticed this yet, and this one I'm not still not completely happy with the name being appropriate or not. It's called
Mm.
link transpose, and let's go back to the top of the page here, and let's see if my I still have audio going.
Yes.
I have two sequences. So I have two sequences running on part 1 and part 2. On both parts, link transpose is on. This is part 1, part 2. And so on the main sequence page, if I transpose one, the other transposes as well.
And so it transposes everybody. What I didn't catch is how you say that I want this part to follow this. I want this part to be in the that part. In that part, you turn it on, and now they're linked. Got it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Basically, it makes it a global, and I don't know. I'm open to suggestions.
Does it only
Yeah, it becomes a group.
does it only
Yes.
follow transpositions on the first part, or can you transpose it from any of the linked parts and all the other ones will follow?
Good question.
Any of the linked parts, and they will all follow. In fact,
That's
Very cool.
it's
cool.
basically just overriding the transpose parameter, right? So when I set it to 4 on part 2, it also sets it to 4 on part 1.
That's great.
And if one were to organize their parts so that one of the parts was already transposed, and that relationship is what you wanted to then transpose, you have to write your part with transpose at 0, basically, to make this work.
What I would say to do is, go to the pitch page and use encoder 9 and move it up by 2 semitones.
Yes, exactly. Okay, right.
And then also a little bit of housekeeping is that for a while now, I've wanted to make that the octave and transposition settings are reflected in the actual note names. So,
cool.
we're down an octave, and even if we set transpose to 0, this still says C5, but really it's C4. And I want these values to display inclusive of these changes. And
that's really cool. That'll be useful.
Yeah, and put a little badge here that says that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question then, this is things get into a little bit of a rabbit hole here, is if you're doing modulation on this, does
have them
this
dynamically
reflected?
change?
Yeah, that I probably won't show.
Yeah.
But it does show, as it does here, that there's some modulation on here.
Yeah.
So there's always that tension between giving you the information you need to understand what's going on, but not giving you so much that it's overload.
Yeah.
And then, so that is link transposition.
Very cool.
And then the last one, which is for Steve Turner, who's on vacation in Thailand, he's somewhere at a beach. Well, I think it's I think he said it's going to be 5 a.m., so hopefully he's not passed out on a beach. But so he wants templates, and so I've implemented a basic template function.
He's not the only one.
Yeah. No, I think this is something we'll all use. So the name of this project is Temple 02, and the idea is to keep this from getting very complicated on the UI is that if you happen to name a file name and the first 5 letters are TEMPL,
Cool.
it treats it as a template. And then you
I like
get
it.
2 characters to number or further identify what your template is. So you can have you can have several templates and key them according to what you're after. And then
Nice.
so I've been editing this one, so it's not really appropriate to call this a template, but if I go in and I load template 01, um, I get a project, and I believe if I go
Oh,
to,
you load a template, but it creates a new project. Interesting.
yeah, so what happens is when you load a template, it automatically renames it to as if you had created a new project. So this is proj 006, which would be the next available project name.
Nice.
Good. So
And
you
then you
don't
go to save it.
accidentally
Right over your
change your
template.
template.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The one thing you need to have that I don't have yet is the ability to load the template and actually load and edit that project, because of course you might want to go back and change your template.
Edit your template project. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, how do
So
you edit the templates when you select it? It becomes a project.
um, well, you can always rename the project and write over a template, but I'll probably just have it so that I don't know, you hold the shift key or something when you're loading the project to make it actually load that
Mm.
template.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you had a temple open, and that's why I was curious.
That's the one I had open. I just kept it open.
Okay,
That's Temple 02.
and you did a save as and named it that.
Yes,
Gotcha.
yes. Um, and so it keeps your part arrangements. So I had part 5 and 6 are chords, and part 8 is drums, and in part 8 the default length is 16, and in part 1 and 2 the lengths are already set to 16. So this all gets loaded, and your routings will be loaded as well. I don't remember if I did any routing things in here. I did not. Um, but Steve's main gripe is that the trigger outs default to clocks, and they should either default, probably in his case, default to specific drum triggers.
Yeah, in my case,
So
I use the first three as trigger ends and drive them from grids. So yeah,
yeah,
that's a whole
yeah,
row of I/O that
Oh.
I'm setting up all the time. So that's really great.
yeah,
I
yeah. No,
have
I
yet
think
to
this
do
is
that, but I want to start addressing some parts with external
You need to
grid
get a jack
external.
expander.
Yeah, that's it. Well, you still can without it, correct? The inputs being external 1 and 2. Is that where you would do that, or run
you
clock
do that
reset?
from one. Yeah, if you're not using these for something else, and I
You
think
could
I saw
reassign
you
them.
had these patched. Yeah.
Currently, those are outputs for me that actually are run clock and reset. Or actually, no, reset is
Okay.
assigned to something else. But yeah, okay. But so wait, so are we saying that external 1 and 2 can be used if run clock and reset are already taken?
No, no, not at this
Okay.
point.
Okay. Gotcha.
Something else. So let's see. Looking forward a little bit, something I would like to have is that um, part 1 subsequencers would be available in other parts as modulation sources. So I'd,
Oh yeah.
theoretically be able to set something up here and then go to part 2, and it would show up here, and you'd be able to pick SS1 and 2 as sources. So getting back to the link transpose, this would be another way. If you wanted an automated transposition, you could set it up in part 1, and then the other parts could see it. Um,
Yeah.
So we can sequence our 12-bar blues.
yes, exactly. And I better check the chat line because I know there's some folks, yep, that are going to be interested in that. And then one other thing that's a little further down the line is I know people want to trigger things, say preset changes or I don't know, chance hops on and off or something. So I'm starting to think about what it would look like if the sources included, these or these trigger inputs, and what those would
Yeah.
be useful for.
Cool.
Very nice.
So
Thank
that's
you,
our,
Jim Claus. That's
yeah,
a great Christmas holiday gift.
yep. So yeah, templates and preset sync on 2-bar boundaries and more, and then link transpose.
Cool.
So let's see how we're doing on the
When will this firmware be up on the forum for people to download?
soon.
Cool.
Yeah.
Before
Uh-huh.
before Christmas. They're
There
all
you
three
go.
fairly simple changes. I just need to check a few things, and there were a few other little bugs. I always wanted to make sure they were repaired correctly, and
Nice.
yeah. So just in time to goof off on the holiday while everybody's kids are unwrapping their presents and terrorizing the house, and yeah.
So I don't know if this is too much for now, but yeah, I realized something that I wanted to hear about from both of you and have us, kind of compare and contrast is how we go about the process of making these parts. Like what is your sequencing process? Because as I
Mm-hmm.
was finally, making things that I wanted to save, I found that I have a couple different ways of doing things. And do we have the time and bandwidth for this, or should we save that for deep dive number 2 with special guest Lightbath?
Well, we can continue on, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, then maybe if I will start with a very simple, like, this is what I've done, and I really want to see like what you guys end up doing. I know for me, or actually, I noticed with yours, Jim, like for example, you had a fairly short part on that one. Like your slower part
Mm-hmm.
was what it was like, like 4 or something. And
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
uh, I'm I'm realizing more that starting with a shorter length, a shorter pattern length, um, is a little easier to deal with because right from the beginning, like by default, I sort of just started making 16 steps. Like I would just make a part and they would have rests and you know
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, there would be disabled, you know, kind of like it is now. I mean, this is like a part made with linearly. So this is like a linear composition, right? Where ba 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 ba, right? The XOX style, programming. But then some of these other parts, let's see, which like this, for example, that should be this. Oh yeah, this is because it's only these 6 and it's moving fairly quickly because I'm doing this to it all the time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
changing the rate dynamically. Uh, but then some parts. So okay, so that's the second way. The second way is just something that's more like an arpeggiator. So that part was my arpeggiator that I would like change parameters on and transpose externally. But then there's another part, and I don't remember which one in here would be doing that, but um, where I go deep and then I start opening up the modulation zones and start transposing and doing octave transposes transposition. So it's kind of like um, the report for National Endowment, Suzanne Ciani document. If you're familiar with the 1975, it was how she got the grant to do that Buchla
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
thing, and she talks about her 2 sequencers. Right, she has one that's just doing octave shifts. Um, what's the word? Uh, um, Polymetrically against her normal melodic sequencer.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
it makes a more complex, longer sequence by combining the two. So that's obviously like what's going on here with these modulation subsequencers. And so once I get into this, though, is when it starts to really get difficult you to know what's happening. It goes deep. So I guess one thing I'm curious when you guys explain what you're doing is I'm curious how deep do you go with modulation of primary um, musical parameters. So transpositions, octave definitely changes it. And if any of these other things end up being changed, and then lastly, any kind of chance operation, if I start, you know, doing that,
Mm-hmm.
for example,
Mm-hmm.
skip to the next, like it just alters the sequence so far. I find that this is my more like generative approach, right? So I've got my like XOX approach, I've got my sort of arpeggiator sort of thing, and then I've got just like the deep thing that where I'm exploring and exploring and exploring, and hey, that sounds cool. Okay, that's it. Whereas the other ones might be more like, okay, I'm kind of going for a thing. I can sort of program in via the steps what I want to hear. So, yeah.
I mean, my approach is pretty similar to that in the sense that I will sometimes start with a preconceived idea, particularly if it's a drum pattern or a bass line. I'll have it in my head and I'll sequence it across like 16 steps and 16th notes and add the notes where I feel it needs to go.
Yeah.
And then the most likely change from there would be to give it a slow chord progression, or if it's a
Yes.
drum part, maybe some chance ops to add and remove notes.
Now, when you
Um,
say a slow chord progression, do you mean a subsequence moving at whole notes
yes,
or
yes,
two whole notes or yeah, uh-huh.
yeah, exactly that, exactly that.
That's new for me. That approach is new. I'd never had a device that allowed me to do that, and that sort of clicked in the preparation for this stream. Although I didn't ever launch the one that did that, but that idea where yeah, you have this little sequence, and now it moves up a fifth, and
Yeah,
now it
yeah.
moves like to the 5 and the 4 or something like that. And the issue, the challenge with those kind of transpositions that I've found so far is I then need to limit the number of notes in the scale that the part is using, because often you can't just transpose willy nilly and have it work. And so this idea of using global uh, quantization and
Hmm.
having all the parts match that doesn't necessarily work. Where I might want all of the notes to be available globally, but that one part that's going to be transposed around, it's easier to make sure I'm starting pentatonic and then transposing it. However, am I mistaken here? If I have a part set to just a pentatonic and I have a subsequencer transposing it, will it only transpose to the parts quantizer or to the global
So
quantizer?
if you set a scale or a custom scale on a part, that overrides the global.
Okay,
And
so
then
any
yeah,
transpositions are going to
yeah,
be only the notes of that scale.
yes, yes,
Okay, got it.
yeah,
So then the way I would have to then not limit myself with the scale, which is my like easy way. I'll always end up. My approach has always been use less notes of the scale so I can just turn the knobs and get wild,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's going to stay in it. I have to be more aware, be on the pitch screen, and look at my notes and be thinking of okay, stick to 1 5 2 6. Stacked fifths early on. Don't go past that if you're going to be transposing. The transposing the seventh of a scale or the fourth up and down with fifths doesn't usually sound the
yeah,
best.
yeah.
So yeah,
Now,
okay,
a trick I will sometimes use if I want that regular transposition, but I need to have specific notes as opposed to just a shift, is let's say, and I tend to use fairly short sequences. So let's say I've got 3 or 4 note sequence. Um, I will double it out.
uh
So let's
huh,
say it's a 4 note sequence. So I've got steps 1 through 4 are the original arpeggio or ostinato, and then
yeah,
steps 5 through 8
yep,
are the variation.
and change
I'll
your
then use a
start point.
subsequencer to sequence the length of the sequence will be 4. I'll use the
Yeah.
subsequencer to modulate the start position and go from 1 to 5 and back.
Now that is a cool way of
Yeah,
using start that isn't necessarily confusing. Where with
yeah.
mine, when I was trying to change start just to get variation, that is the Caterina Barbieri approach. I've heard that she makes these insanely long sequences on the ER 101
Uh huh.
on
Uh
the
huh.
orthogonal sequencer that she uses, orthogonal devices sequencer that she uses. She makes these extremely long sequences and uses the expander, the 102, I guess maybe it's called, to window all of those, and that's how she's actually
Mm-hmm.
doing these. A lot of these her approach.
Yes. So I'm gonna.
A lot easier to see on the vector, in my
Just,
opinion, though, because we. But
oh yeah. So I've got a 4 note sequence. Let's see. Dare I? Let's mute part 2, or am I in part 2? I'm in part 2, so we'll mute part 1. And then I'll hold Shift and hit the first white key under encoder 1 to double it.
Oh, I
So
don't
now I've
have
got
the
2
peak on those
copies.
yet.
That's just convenient. I'll take
Yeah,
this
that
back down
is.
to 4 steps. And then I can say select these steps, and I can move them up and just make a couple little changes. Clear out the selection. And
Oh, I
then
need to get
on the
better at
subsequent,
selection here. That's so
yeah.
quick.
Oh, the selection sets are great.
Okay, so we're just going to have a 2-step sequence. We're going to go after start, turn this on, and we're just going to go up to 5. Now there are 3 rows of numbers. The top row is the number of the subsequence. The bottom row is the offset I've dialed in, and then the middle row is the actual target value that's going to go. This includes the value of the start step. So if the start step was 2, it would be 2 and 6. It starts up as 1. It's 1 and 5. Anyway,
Yeah.
it makes more sense when you're using it.
Yeah.
So let's see. I've got that running, and it's on 1 whole note.
Yeah.
Something's not right. Length 2, start, enable.
Oh yeah, length was 4 there.
No, something else is going on. Program start on. Okay, I've got something wrong going on. I'll just do it manually to show the trick.
Yeah.
This is a beta build. 4 steps. 1, 2, octave down. The cue. Oh, that's stuck too.
Yeah, that was the behavior I was getting.
Yeah. Here's my. Actually, I think I have an idea that this may have something to do with it.
Yeah. You were on what before bar a moment ago?
2 bars.
Okay. Okay, yeah. I've had mine set on pattern ever since it was available.
Yeah, so I think that's, you found a case where that one was,
right. Yeah.
turn this one back on. Send our start step back to 1. Now the mod sequencer is still messed up. I must have changed something. Live debugging, folks.
Yeah.
Bugs are more likely to come out when you're demonstrating in front of someone else.
Trade shows are excellent for debugging.
Yeah, I bet. There, yeah, we can see the LEDs. Yeah.
Anyway, when modulation is working properly, that's a great way to add some variation while not having to write out separate patterns, you know. And the nice thing is that because both variations are visible, even if you have to page over if they're longer variations, you can edit them and change them on the fly as you see fit.
Yeah, you can see your notes that are happening, and you can choose those notes and anything you would want to do, the ratchets, everything. Yeah. And not have to switch between parts, or not parts, presets.
Presets of a part.
In order to like, oh, let me change the ratchet on this preset. Oh, let me change the ratchet on this preset. Yeah.
I mean, just in terms of personally learning about music and listening to music, is that a lot of the things I really like melodically tend to be fairly simple 3 or 4 note
shapes,
phrases.
Yeah.
And then what you're hearing are those those few notes, that motif being transformed, played in different ways, played at different registers or by different instruments.
Yeah.
And,
It's like the
you know,
SH-101 sequencer. The
yeah.
transpose function on that is amazing. I ended up making there's this video coming out for a project I did with Bitwig for Bitwig's channels, not for Lightbath, and I was making some music on screen, on the SH-101, and I had an arpeggiator, uh, just a root and fifth, that was that was what was set, right, just root and fifth, and then I was externally triggering the 101 with a rhythm, a rhythmic gate, a specific rhythm, and then I was manually transposing it like a lot, like playing it right on the beat, and I got the coolest part that I would never have been able to physically play. Like, I
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
have those skills to play like that on a keyboard. I'm not a keyboard player, but I can press buttons, and so in time, like that I can do. And so I got the coolest part, and I'm just like, this is it. It's like live meta sequencing, and that's
Hmm. Hmm.
kind of what's going on here. I can imagine, to add complexity to this, if that part were externally triggered with some sort of rhythm, now
Hmm.
it's going to be really dancing around and more complex, but you're still able to transpose, and you could just use the keys, the white buttons
Yeah.
along the
Yeah.
bottom, which I learned before today's stream, which I was reminded by Jim before today's stream, that these are transpo. I mean, it's this is the piano keyboard here, so
Yeah. Yeah.
these are your transpositions. Any of these. This whole time I've been queuing up my changes like that, whereas
Hmm.
I could have just done, and then here's our, yeah, well, that, yeah, we we'll just we'll just do one, we'll just do that. But yeah, well, this is cool. So but Chris, what about your approaches here? Like, how
Yeah,
how do you make your sequences?
there's a few different approaches. I usually start with the bass line, and that usually has some phrasing to it. It's not just like four notes repetitive or something like that.
Hmm.
And I'll usually end up just jamming out a bass line on the keyboard and deciding what phrasing, what notes I want, and program that into the vector.
Oh, cool. Okay,
And
you are extracting from internal music making.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
usually the bass line I've thought out ahead of time. I want this rhythm, I want this feel to it, I want these notes,
Yeah.
and I'll use quite a bit of the lengths and mutes inside the vector to set up phrasing, like pickups just before downbeats and things like that.
Yeah.
But then I'll do several lines of ornamentation on top, which might be a couple melodic lines. And those I tend to work much more with their timing than their transposition. I'll make like typically an 8 note sequence, but then drive it from a trigger out from grids. And I'll actively ride the fill slider on grids to go from just playing occasional notes to playing, dense flurries of notes with rhythmic timing, because that's what grids does. And
Mm,
so for the ornamentation sequences, I'm not worrying about where the one is. I just have picked a set of notes that might form a
yeah.
nice chord to play over the bass line.
Yeah.
And then really dynamically decide, does it play sparsely? Does it play dense notes? Does it play something in between?
Yeah.
And after I have, and when I'm coming with those ornamentation sequences, sometimes I'll run into, writer's block, and I'll use the generate function on the vector to just say, I can't come up with a good line for this part. What do you think, Vector? What do you've got? And I'll just start generating. And it might be like 5 of the 8 notes are good. So then I'll go manually tweak the other notes to make them fit in my head what I want it to be over that bass line.
It's amazing how much easier it can be to edit than to
Yes.
create. I've always been that way with everything. In writing, I remembered it when I would, like in college writing, if I had to write essays or anything like that, I found it so much easier to edit. So I got into the habit of not care. I had to teach myself to not care about the first thing that I put out. Just put anything out, and then it's editing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
I
but
agree with that completely. Yeah.
yeah, I
And I'll do
used the generate function for the first time. I was always against that. I was, I was like, oh, I'm a purist. I'm gonna make my parts. I'm not gonna use some sort of, says the guy who just generates everything from random anyway. Like, but like, they're actually pretty good. All the different styles.
yeah. When I have writer's block, I'll use the generate, but then I'll manually edit steps.
Yeah,
I'll go like, no, no, no. Okay, that one's close, and then generate. But then after I have sequences that I like, then I'll go into chance operations and start really editing individual steps. Like, okay, wouldn't it be cool if this step muted occasionally, if this one ratcheted occasionally, this one went to a fifth occasionally, this one went to an octave occasionally? And I'll just go back in my experience as a bass player of what would I do if I was bored out of my skull playing the same line over and over again? What would I do to augment that line to make it
That's
more
why you start
interesting?
with the bass.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah,
you're a bass player
I'm a
first.
bassist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was a guitar first. So yeah. Well, then it sounds to me like your subsequences are not polymetric or anything like that. They're the same length as your primary
sometimes
sequences usually.
if I have like two melodic sequences playing on top of my bass sequence, um, I will do things like go in and set two subsequences of different lengths, like
Yeah.
maybe 4 and 5, and put up octave transpose or whatever patterns in them. But since the subsequences are of different lengths, they have a much longer repeat pattern
Yes.
between the two melodic parts. Now
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot more of that live now that I'm using the calibrator module where I can dial that in live. But it really comes down to how many free hands I have while I'm playing. Can I play this part or manipulate this part live, or do I need it to take care of itself? And if I need it to take care of itself, that's when I start programming subsequences and chance operations.
I tend to do both for octaves. I view octave changes as the manual octave changes are as an arranger, as an orchestrator. Like, what register do I want it in now? But
Yeah,
a certain part might have octave transpositions in it just to make it more contrapuntal. Make it more like counterpoint. And that's another thing Caterina Barbieri is amazing at. I don't know anything. I haven't researched. This is just from listening to her music, but it sounds to me like she's writing a singular line, like two lines maximum half the time, like two voices. But that those lines are, first of all, they're monophonic lines. They are jumping octaves very specifically so as to basically feel like two parts. It's like there's a bass, it's like a left hand, right hand on the piano sort of
yeah,
thing, but it's you only ever get one at a time. But those bass notes are if all the high notes were muted and you only heard the low notes, it would have a cycle and a good feel to it, a certain rhythmic
yeah.
feel. And then the high ones are the opposites of that, making some sort of thing so that they're these two interlinked rhythmic
Oh, that,
things.
that sounds like a lot of what I do. I'll do the bass line. I'll put some variations like whether or not there's a pickup note between the downbeat or occasional transposition on one of the notes, but it's usually pretty solid. And then when I enter a section of a piece of my music, I'm playing with two melodic sequences on top, even stalling them completely with grids, saying, no, no beats on that melodic part, just do this melodic part and trade them
That's
off.
just grids all the way down.
Yeah, grids all the way down, but
Okay.
just stall the part completely.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's
And
great.
so I'll quite
I
often
never
do
got
what,
grids. I should pick up.
yeah,
That's the OG. That's
it's
so. That's
under,
the one of the first ones.
it's underappreciated, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But
Yeah.
anyway, but I'll do quite often what sounds like two musicians trading lines against each other. My two melodic
Yeah.
parts, by just going, okay, you play, you play, you play, you play. Now let's both play together, take different leads, do octave offsets. And when I've milked that as much as I can for a section, that's when I then do a scene change for a whole new set of sequences and then start building
Yeah.
up to that again. So
I like this indexing of tone row sort of approach here. Like, here are my pitch, because that's very much that's kind of where I'm coming from with a lot of things. Like, here, but I would do that in the scale, right? Like, I would be like, here's my scale that would be changing, like in the hybrid videos that we put the
yeah,
screens up for earlier. Like that stuff, I had that little keyboard, this little Q Nexus that's attached right now, but I was latching notes in that, and that's how it was just changing what would happen. But the indexer of those notes was actually a vector sequencer that was just moving around, different shapes.
yeah,
Basically, the way I would have shapes on there.
It's
But
a
this,
really effective technique, particularly if you're not sure what you want to do, but you want to work
yeah,
with a certain group of notes. You can put them on there and start using different processes to move through them. You can shift half of them up an octave or every third note up or down an octave. You can take a subset and loop that, play it backwards. You just keep iterating through these possible changes and finding things you like. And and if when I'm working on a composition, I'll start, okay, this is good, I need to change it, I'll duplicate it out, change it, duplicate it out, and then I'll end up with 20 presets and then go
yeah,
back and start editing and moving things around. And but the yeah these I mean, that's really kind of the core of what the vector was about, is being able to take something, a simple sequence or a series of notes, and making it very easy to manipulate them in interesting ways so you can get some useful results.
Yeah, that's
Remembering
where I
this
really,
iterative thing is good, like
Yeah.
copying and pasting and then changing. I don't do that enough.
yeah,
Now I'm
and,
supposed to
and
do
that's
it.
where the scenes for me come in really handy is I'll come up with a whole bunch of individual phrases that I like, see what combinations of those phrases work well together, and then start building scenes based on different combinations of my presets.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Oh, this is great. This is great. There was something in my head a moment ago that or a few moments ago, about this. I kind of want to see if we can address this. If I can only remember, what it was. So, when was it when we're triggering these sequences externally like this? Um, oh yeah, no, just this idea. So you're basically, you have your safety net, which is your harmonic information, but
Yes.
it is allowing you to get the stoke. Like for me, if I'm just pulling up sequences that I've pre-composed, I have trouble getting fully into the stoke. Like but I get in that zone if I have to create it, and then that surprise of like, wow, hey, that was good, something new that it presented to me. That's what gets me in the place, and then the music goes to a place that I never would have taken it. So it sounds like you're building in these places to allow yourself to be freely improvising, but
Yeah,
within constraints.
yeah. The way I treat it is I really think of my notes very similar to like granular in terms of like how dense do I want this passage to be?
Yeah,
How much do I want them spread?
yeah.
Um, the way that a lot of
That's
people treat
magnificent.
granular processors to process audio is how I think about I have these 8 notes that I really like. Um, how do I want to manipulate how spaced out the grains, the notes are? How much do I
Yes.
want to shift them vertically? And I really treated it while I'm playing live, what density and what range should I be in? I've already got the notes, don't have to think about those anymore. Now I'm moving them around just in a space in my head of where I want them to be.
This is good. This is what I need. This is the missing link. This is where I had been challenged by the vector's approach of committing that density within time. Like it's not going like you can change your rate, yeah. Um but to be fully hands-on with that, it does seem like this external triggering and having these note like rows kind of, or
Yeah, I'm doing
collections
external
that
triggering
work.
quite a bit, but also I used to do a lot of set up a sequence, and then I would just play the mute buttons on the sequence, decide where the holes were in a
I
sequence.
forget about all those. Select and mute and skip. That's going to be my next place to get. Yeah, okay. I remember Sam talking about this, right? Selecting just certain notes
Hmm.
and applying things to them. I can't remember what the context was, but yeah, that was a technique he was
Yeah,
using too.
skipping or muting, skipping just to change the order that the notes appear in, but muting just to start knocking holes into your sequences and then bringing notes back in.
Yeah, yeah, right. Revealing parts, and that's another. I know I've just been listening to so much Katerina Barbieri lately. I'm kind of fanning out on her pretty hard, but that's something I notice in her music too. You'll have this line, boom beep boom beep, space,
Yeah,
boom beep boom beep, space, but later it's all going to be filled in. You're just
yeah,
hearing part of that. So, you know, uh, total side note on this, another feature on the vector that I'm absolutely loving is being able to shift left or right by one step. Oh, this is huge because I'll make a part and I'll hear it in context with the music, and then I'll hear the one in a new place. And in every other device I've ever had to use, you have to do the part over. You have to shift it yourself and program it in. Now I
yeah,
can just boop 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 boop. Yep, that's where the one is. Like, whew,
yeah.
big
Like
leap.
quite often with like an 8 step, I was like, oh, the 5 should have been the one.
Yeah.
Like okay, just move her back. And
And for me, it's in some confusing place because everybody's an odd number and on some weird division,
um,
and so I can't brain it. I literally just have to hit it and then hit run
Hmm.
twice, like
Hmm.
start over. Okay, this is where it's supposed to be. Which, by the way, I learned yesterday that there's a setting for run that doesn't make it always go back to your first scene.
Preset. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I had it on that, and I was just like, man, every time I hit this, I gotta go back. And I started to put it in our shared doc of like
Mhm. Mhm.
issues, and then I was like, oh no, that's a setting. Let me delete that from the doc. So yeah, and it's
Those are
like,
my
no, he thought of
favorite.
this already. Wait, say
Yeah,
again. Yeah,
that's my favorite. When what it needs to do this, I'm like, oh, it's that setting.
yeah, exactly. Done.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like
So,
accomplishment without action. Like,
yeah,
yeah, you get something new done without having to do anything
yeah.
new.
And just to bring it up, is it semi-relevant? Is online help um, is now available, and one thing people that are using this is feel free to mention things that aren't in here, and it's contextual, right? So if I get out of here and I'm over on chance ops and it's shift next, and on the Mark IIs it's in the panel. It's on the Mark I's it's the same key change, but it's not on the panel. It's
Yeah,
contextual, right? So there's chance ops, and then if I'm on sequence control, then it's sequence control pages.
I didn't realize that either. Jim, how is it that I was able to do a copy edit for the manual and be in like copy editor mode, but yet somehow the content just disappeared from my brain? I think all of this is mentioned, isn't it? Like, so yeah,
Well, you have to work at multiple levels, right?
yeah.
And
I was in
I
the
know how
zoom
that
in
is.
grammar mode. Yeah,
Yeah, when you're in like the word level or the punctuation level, then you have
yeah.
to bounce out to like the paragraph and page level, and then there's the whole anyway. Yeah,
And I think
but
it's also because I left all that to you. I'm like, as far as content is concerned, I'm
yeah,
sure this guy has it. So I'm not even gonna think there. I'm just gonna reorganize a couple little things in there. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. No,
Nice.
the new manuals turned out great. I still need to get you a printed copy, and
Oh yeah, thanks.
of
Which,
course
by the
it's
way, the
yeah,
button thing, the button click, I just
yeah.
stuffed some paper inside of the little caps that were that
Ah,
the
yeah, 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 yeah.
tolerances were off on or
Uh huh,
whatever,
uh huh.
and they all press, and it's totally
Good,
fine. So
good. Yeah, you and Chris both got early units. Somehow Chris
yeah,
hasn't mashed them enough, but the new knobs are they fit deeper down on the pins, and for
yeah,
the production units we added little spacers so they don't get stuck.
yeah.
Um,
Which makes it look nice there, but yeah, no, I tend to slam down. I sometimes like hit. I don't even just
yeah,
press. I'll actually, give it a little percussive hit. So yeah, that's probably why.
all good. That's what the beta test is about.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
so now you've got a whole series on hybrid systems. I just want to bring
The
up a
first
couple of
one,
videos.
everybody could potentially skip the first one. The first one
Yeah.
came out where I had a completely different setup. It was just to travel. And then literally as I was editing the first video, COVID happened, lockdowns happened, tour
Mm-hmm.
got canceled, and so I still released the video anyway, but it was no longer relevant because the whole idea was, let me make a video about traveling. But then a year or two later, I finally had a new computer that could handle the such a lift, and made these two episodes 2 and 3 with this system. So those are kind of the pair.
And then so you got two videos in the series. Well, two more videos in this series. And can you tell us just a little bit about the different? Well, particularly on the third one, it sounds like you're talking a bit more about your controller setup.
Right, yeah. So, the second one introduces what the voices are and how they're controlled via MIDI, and how the magic is that there's wiring behind the board, right? That there's these
Yeah.
expert sleepers modules kind of all communicate with I2C and MIDI under it. And then the next one, the one that we're seeing here, yeah, I'm kind of going a little bit more into the controllers and what's happening in Bitwig Studio to have all these macros working the way they are, and that MIDI fighter twister that's the top left of that sort of little grid that I have going on there has most of the things that I'm doing, and so a lot of the effects controls and transpositions and probability for each track and filters on each channel, and some I guess the reverb controls that are the sends are on the top row of knobs on that little mixer. Those sort of two grid controllers down there. That what are
Mm-hmm.
they? What is Intec? studio calls those grids. So they're each of these little. Here, I'll just flip over to my screen and
Yeah,
I'll show this.
there you go. Yeah.
It's not going to focus, but oh yeah, my eyes aren't on the screen. It'll focus. It's eye priority on the
Yeah.
on the Sony camera here. But yeah, each of these is all magnetic, and so they attach together, and then it gives data and power to each of those. So that's what you're seeing on there. A combination of three of their grid modules with a MIDI fighter twister, and a lot of organization to get that twister the way I wanted. I had spreadsheets that I would just decide, what parameters are where. I would use it for a while and then realize, nope, it needs to be changed. And it's not easy to change it. It's not like you can drag and drop and copy and paste between. You just have to reprogram the whole thing. So it's DJ Tech Tools makes a really great controller. The software is a little lacking, but it's worth it for the controller. It's
Mm-hmm.
still my favorite knob controller I've used, especially the fact that when you press one of those knobs, you can set it up to have an alternate function. So there's like a hidden function behind every knob, which helps me for the memory game. Do you guys remember that
Mm-hmm.
game? You would turn over the card and there'd be an apple on it, and then you'd
Mm-hmm.
have to
Mm-hmm.
figure out where the apple was in the spread. It's like that, and it eventually I'm pretty good at remembering things spatially and by color. I'm not good with names. This is why with half of my modules, I'm always like, it's the lower left knob. Like I
Mm-hmm.
still
Mm-hmm.
don't know the names of all the controls on rings. Like maybe I know rings, but still, yeah. So it can be color coded. That's huge. The color for me. I can find my way between the 4 different pages that are on it. So, it's 16 knobs per page plus
That's
another
a lot of
16 hidden under each times 4. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a
That's a
big
lot of
number. I can't do that
controls.
kind of math.
Yeah. So I've
So,
also got an image here for your master class. Tell us about that.
oh yeah, so no, I was just kind of including that, thinking that if there was at any point today that I'd be talking about some synth basics, like just sort of what is, how I kind of go about the basics of synthesis. So, not just here are oscillators and we VCA them and they're filtered and they're going into effects, which is kind of the basics of it, but
Mm-hmm.
how I sort of have organized things leading up to this hybrid system is probably best summarized in that masterclass video. It was a little thing that I did remotely. It was a masterclass at Tulane University in New Orleans that I did from the studio, a virtual class, and yeah. So the way that I choose to say weave a paraphonic voice between the two STO oscillators that are flipped back and forth between using a shifty, IntelliGel
Mm-hmm.
shifty Hocketer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that sort of had evolved into the way I'm using Just Friends now in this current system that has 6 paraphonic voices, so that every new note of a monophonic sequence just triggers a round robin on the next one. So it just
Nice.
allows notes to overlap each other. What I miss from the two octave or the two voice two oscillator style with this is I had octave control over each of them. So what we're talking about here with like using a subsequence maybe on the vector to change octaves, I
Mm-hmm.
could recontextualize a monophonic line into like a bass part and a lead part sort of. And that was always pretty fun to get new ways just by flipping the octaves on those. Back then I didn't transpose anything more than an octave. I wasn't doing fifths or anything like that. But
Nice.
that kind of thing going into some sort of effects like delays, and really that case is still the same design conceptually in a way of what I've got going on now, where there's like one synth voice that can overlap notes,
Mm-hmm.
now Just Friends, then STOs, and then a rings and a plats. And then that's what this, case is
Amazing.
now, except it's a two distings doing those roles. Yeah.
Excellent. And then, of course, people want to find out more. You've got a Patreon.
I do.
Yeah.
That's a, if anybody is into, I mean, there's the standard Patreon where what is it, like $5 and you join the thing, and we've got the Discord and there's the group and there's all that cool stuff. But then there's some higher tiers for I've been a music teacher for most of my adult life. I was a guitar player first in high school, and when my guitar teacher retired, I took over his business, and I ended up teaching. I went from delivering pizza to like teaching 40 students a week, and it was wild. Like it was a learning process. I lost like 10 students the first week. Like I didn't know what I was doing, and so some people didn't have the patience, and I learned eventually. It was sink or swim, and I eventually learned, and later went to music school and went back into teaching. So I still teach, and I offer my teaching through Patreon. Everybody that I meet with, except for one person that doesn't that isn't into synths or anything, and doesn't really need to be part of the like our Discord community
Hmm.
that's part of Patreon. Yeah, everybody just goes through this. So yeah, if anybody wants to do one-on-one kind of stuff, that's a good place to get to that.
Awesome. Awesome. Also, in upcoming events, we have a big synth meet happening in downtown Los Angeles at the end of January during the NAMM show. I'll be there exhibiting. And Chris, I assume you're going to be dropping in at least one of those days?
Yeah, I'm going to be there all day Sunday.
Yeah. And then just before that, and that is a free event, I believe. Yep, free event.
Yes.
Two
You do need to
days.
register ahead of time, but it is a free event.
Yeah, so register ahead of time. And I'll be there, and I won't be able to get away from you, so it's a good time to ask questions and get demos. And then a couple days before that, there is the SoCal Synth Society's kind of basically an annual NAMM party now.
Yeah.
You can't call NAMM parties NAMM parties. It's just a
No.
party.
Yeah.
This used to be known as the NAM Jam, but we're not allowed to call it NAM.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And what time do you go on, Chris?
I am the entrance music. I start playing when the doors open, and I play an extended set while people are coming in and settling in, and then we move me out of the way and move to the normal rotation of other performers.
Okay.
So I'm playing about 45 minutes or so just after the doors open while people are coming in and getting settled in.
All right. Well, I changed my ticket, so I will be there.
Cool.
And then looking a little further ahead,
Yes.
we've got Electrowave in Colorado Springs, and I think is there an online component to this?
I don't think so. I'm
Okay.
not aware of there being an online component, but it's an in-person thing. Second weekend in March, if I remember correctly, they're going to have updated information here: performances, lectures, talks, panels. And we're going to do the thing where I'm going to play Friday night. And then Saturday, I'm going to pick apart my set and then show people how I did my set.
Nice.
Explain my system, but as I come to every change, explaining what am I doing to execute that change and why am I doing a change there, etc.
Very nice. Very nice.
And it should be in quad as well. So
Of course.
yeah.
Um, so, all right. Thanks, guys. We're
Good
bumping up
times.
against dinner time here, so
Yeah.
I'm
You
gonna
can see how
wind us
dark it's
up.
gone
Yes.
behind me since we started.
It's past my dinner time out here in the East Coast. I'll tell you that.
All
Talking
right.
through dinner.
So I think we're covered on the chat thing.
Yeah.
Certainly, anybody who has questions that I missed or something, you can hit me up on Facebook Messenger or emails. And if you're in LA, come by the booth for sure at Buchla and Friends. Uh, Brian, man, thanks so much. This has been amazing, and I think we might have to do this again sometime because there's
Love
clearly a
to.
lot we have to talk about. And
Yeah. Fun
Yeah.
so,
conversation.
yeah, and definitely we'll set up some sort of offline get together so we can go through
Yeah.
and make sure everything's tuned up well. I mean, that's
Great.
it's I'm always asking for trouble when I add lots of new features, but being able to work with people and find that they're really using them and it's really helping them, get closer to where they want to be,
Yeah.
makes it all worthwhile.
That's a great closing idea from me here. I have always been in search for the sequencer, the sequencer, right? And I don't know if that exists. I think it is the holy grail. It is the grail, conceptually. But that said, vector is the closest that I've gotten to that I've found to that, and that's why I reached out to you in the first place. I was kind of like, I think this is the thing that I'm going for. So I appreciate all of your work in this instrument, and the flexibility of being able to consider ideas where I can say, hey, I'd love to be able to do this thing, and to have that be a potential future. So very exciting.
That's great. That's great. No, I'm really glad you reached out. It's been, very productive going back and forth. I'm looking forward to working together some more.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me on. It's good
yeah.
chatting with you too.
And Chris, always huge thanks. Always great to have you online.
Yeah,
And
always fun to share. I'm the
yeah,
same place with the vector. Like it is the center of everything I do musically. That it thinks the way I think, and works out great.
so all right. Thanks everybody for joining in. In a few days, we'll have chapter markers up, so it'll make it easier to zip through the video to certain sections and come back and reference certain things. And so we'll see you all again online on our next deep dive. Have a good evening.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
I almost hit end. I forgot I'm not the one doing this.